The night Tommy knocked on our door, I had a gun in my hand, not pointed at him. Pointed at myself. Let me back up. My name is David Chen, and 6 months ago I was worth $8 million on paper. Today I'm worth nothing, less than nothing, and the man standing in my doorway, the homeless man my wife had been feeding every Tuesday for 2 years, was holding something that would change everything I thought I knew about success, failure, and what it means to be truly bankrupt. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts where all American tragedies start, with ambition. I was 23 when I landed the job at Silverman & Cross, one of the most aggressive hedge funds in Manhattan. The kind of place where they didn't ask if you wanted to work 80-hour weeks. They asked if you were strong enough to handle it. Trading isn't a job, my managing director told me on day one. It's a blood sport. The weak don't survive. The strong don't sleep. I didn't sleep much after that. High-frequency trading. Algorithmic execution. Microseconds that meant millions. My entire world compressed into the glow of 6 monitors and the adrenaline of beating the market by fractions of seconds. Rachel, my wife, tried to understand at first. Explain it to me, she'd say over dinner. Back when we still had dinner together. What do you actually do all day? I find inefficiencies, I'd tell her. Patterns and chaos. I execute trades faster than human perception. The algorithms I build make money while people blink. But what does it mean? She'd press. What are you building? What are you creating? Wealth, I'd say, like it was obvious. Our future. She'd go quiet after that. I thought it was awe. I was too blind to see it was grief. Year 1, junior analyst. 70,000 salary. 100-hour weeks. I missed Rachel's birthday because the European markets were volatile. She said she understood. Year 2, associate trader. 200,000 with bonus. I missed our anniversary because we were shorting mortgage-backed securities. She stopped saying she understood. Year 3, senior trader. 500,000. I missed Christmas because I was in the office until 3 a.m. every night that week, riding the wave of the financial crisis. Other people's catastrophes were my windfalls. Do you feel bad about it? Rachel asked me once. Profiting from people losing their homes? I'm not making them lose their homes, I said. I'm just recognizing reality before everyone else does. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters in my world. She looked at me like she was trying to find someone she used to know. Then she left the room. I went back to my laptop. Year 4 was when Rachel started disappearing on Tuesday mornings. I didn't notice at first. I left the apartment at 5:30 a.m. and didn't come home until midnight most nights. Our Tribeca loft, 1,800 square feet of exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, had become a hotel where 2 strangers occasionally crossed paths. Where do you go on Tuesdays? I asked her once, casually while checking my phone. I volunteer, she said. Oh, that's nice. I wasn't really listening. The markets were opening in Tokyo. At a soup kitchen. For homeless people. That's great, babe. Really great. My thumb was already scrolling through futures contracts. She stared at me for a long moment. I didn't look up, David, she said quietly. When's the last time you actually saw me? What do you mean? I see you right now. No, she said. You're looking at me. That's different than seeing me. I glanced up, irritated. Rachel, I've got the Tokyo Open in 3 minutes. Can we do this later? She left the room. I dove back into my screens. I had no idea that Tuesday mornings would eventually save my life, and then destroy it, and then save it again. Year 5, managing director. $2 million year. I was 31 years old and had forgotten what my wife's laugh sounded like. The panic attack hit me on a Wednesday, middle of trading session. Every screen flashing red. A position going sideways. My algorithms misfiring. $50 million evaporating in real time, and then my hands started shaking. Not nervously, violently. Like they didn't belong to my body anymore. The room tilted. My chest compressed. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The numbers on the screens blurred into meaningless hieroglyphics. Chen! My director's voice sounded like it was coming through water. "Chen, what the hell are you doing?" "Close the position." I couldn't move. My fingers wouldn't obey. The shaking spread from my hands to my arms to my entire body. Jesus Christ, someone get him out of here. Two junior traders lifted me from my chair, half carried me to the elevator, dumped me in a taxi with instructions to go to the ER. I don't remember the ride. I remember the hospital room, the monitors, the IV in my arm, and I remember Rachel walking through the door. I'd called her, apparently. First time I'd called her during work hours in 14 months. "I can't do this anymore," I told her. My voice sounded small. "But I can't stop. We need the money. The apartment, your student loans, my parents in California. David." She took my hand. Her touch felt foreign. How long had it been since we'd touched? "We don't need any of it." "What are you talking about?" "We need each other. That's all we've ever needed. Everything else is just noise we convinced ourselves was a symphony." I wanted to believe her. But the apartment cost $12,000 a month. Her student loans were $2,000. My parents' assisted living was $3,000. The car payment, the insurance, the lifestyle we'd built. "I can't just walk away," I said. "I'm not asking you to walk away." She squeezed my hand. "I'm asking you to walk toward something, toward us, toward life. They'll fire me if I take more than 2 weeks. Then let them fire you." I stared at her. "You can't mean that." "I mean it more than I've meant anything in 5 years. I took a leave of absence. 8 weeks. Medical reasons," my director said, his sympathy as authentic as a $3 bill. "Get your head right, Chen. We need you sharp, or we don't need you at all." The first week home, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd forgotten how to exist without the markets, without the adrenaline, without the scoreboard constantly telling me if I was winning or losing. I slept until noon, wandered the apartment like a ghost, checked my phone compulsively, even though I'd been locked out of the trading systems. Rachel watched me with a mixture of pity and hope. "Come with me tomorrow," she said on Monday night. "Where?" "Tuesday mornings. Come see what I do." I almost said no. But the apartment felt like a cage, and I had nothing else to fill the hours. "Okay," I said. I had no idea that decision would lead to a gun in my hand 6 months later, and a homeless man at my door holding the key to everything. The St. Francis Community Kitchen didn't look like redemption. It looked like defeat. Basement of a church on the Lower East Side. Fluorescent lights that flickered like dying stars. Linoleum floors scarred by decades of shuffling feet. Long folding tables that had seen better decades. The smell of industrial-strength coffee and something else. Not quite desperation, but its close cousin. "Rachel." A man's voice, bright with genuine warmth. I turned to see a figure approaching. Late 50s, maybe 60. Hard to tell. The streets age people in dog years. His jacket was held together with safety pins. His boots were duct-taped at the soles. But his smile was real, reaching his eyes in a way that smiles in my world never did. "Tommy." Rachel hugged him. Actually hugged him. When was the last time she'd hugged me like that? Like she meant it, not like she was going through motions. "You brought a friend." Tommy's eyes landed on me. Sharp eyes, assessing. I felt suddenly conscious of my Canada Goose jacket. "My $700 boots, my husband David." Tommy extended his hand. "The Wall Street guy. Heard a lot about you." I shook his hand, surprised by the firmness of his grip. "All good, I hope." "She says you work too hard." He grinned. "I'm retired from that particular mistake. Come on, eggs won't scramble themselves." I'd negotiated billion-dollar positions across 3 continents. I'd stared down managing directors and held my ground when everyone else folded. But standing in that kitchen with a spatula, watching Tommy show me the proper technique for scrambling eggs for 80 people, I felt more lost than I'd ever felt in a boardroom. "Not too much stirring," Tommy instructed. "You gotta let 'em be. They'll come together on their own if you don't force it. Everything doesn't need to be controlled, David. Some things just need space to become what they're meant to be." Was he still talking about eggs? Rachel was across the room pouring coffee, laughing at something a woman was saying. I hadn't heard that laugh in years. Free, unguarded. The laugh of someone who wasn't constantly calculating the cost of joy. She's good people, Tommy said, following my gaze. Comes every week. Never misses. Even came the Tuesday after Hurricane Sandy, wading through water up to her knees to get here. He paused, his eyes still on Rachel. You're a lucky man. I know, I said automatically. Do you? He looked at me now. Because knowing and knowing are different things. The people who came through that kitchen rewrote every assumption I'd built my life on. Marcus had run a restaurant in Brooklyn. 200 seats. 5-star reviews. A James Beard nomination. Then his wife got cancer. No insurance. He'd been between providers, a gap of 6 weeks. 6 weeks that became $140,000 in debt. He liquidated everything for her treatment. The restaurant, his house, his daughter's college fund. She died anyway. The restaurant closed 3 months later. You did everything right, I said to him one morning. Nah. He shook his head, a sad smile playing at his lips. Everything legal. Big difference. Right would have been a system that didn't make me choose between my wife and my livelihood. He handed me a tray of toast. But that's America, isn't it? Land of opportunity. Opportunity to lose everything over one bad break. Jennifer had been a translator at the UN, spoke Mandarin, Russian, and Arabic fluently, fled domestic violence with her 2 daughters, 11 and 9 years old. Paperwork got lost in the bureaucracy. Without documentation, she couldn't work legally. The shelter had a 30-day limit, day 31. She was sleeping in her Camry with her girls. I can negotiate international treaties in 3 languages, she told me, her voice void of self-pity, just stating facts. But I can't speak the language of this city's bureaucracy, and that's the only language that matters when you're trying to survive. Tommy's story came out in pieces, over weeks of Tuesday mornings. Thursday afternoons, I'd started coming more regularly. Rachel never asked me to, just left the keys on the counter and said, leaving at 7 if you want to ride. I always wanted to ride. Tommy had been a carpenter, custom furniture for wealthy clients in Connecticut. Had a daughter, Lily, had a wife, Patricia, who made peach cobbler that won ribbons at the county fair. Then 2008 hit. Construction stopped overnight. His contracts evaporated, savings gone in 6 months. Pride, that particularly male poison, kept him from asking for help until it was too late. Patricia left. Took Lily. He didn't blame her. Couldn't feed my family, he said simply, staring into his coffee. What kind of man can't feed his family? The economy crashed, I said. That wasn't your fault. Tell that to my daughter. Tell that to the space in my chest where my family used to live. He hadn't seen Lily in 6 years. She'd be 17 now. He showed me a picture once, creased and faded from being handled too much. A little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a hammer almost as big as she was. Wanted to be a carpenter like her old man, Tommy said. Wonder what she wants to be now. I went back to work after 8 weeks, lasted 3 weeks and 2 days. My managing director called me into his office. Closed the door. Smiled the smile of someone about to amputate your future. David, we're restructuring your role. Taking you off primary trading. You'll supervise junior analysts. Less stressful, more sustainable. Translation. We don't trust you with real money anymore. I'm fine, I said, hating the pleading edge in my voice. Believe helped. I'm ready to... This isn't negotiable. The smile vanished. You're lucky you still have a job. Take the demotion gracefully or clean out your desk today. I took the demotion. Watched younger traders, 25, hungry, unbroken, execute strategies I'd developed. Sat in meetings where my opinions were tolerated but not valued. Became the cautionary tale people whispered about. That's David Chen. Used to be a killer. Had a breakdown. Now he's just here. The money dried up fast. No more $2 million years. My new salary was $300,000. Still absurd by normal standards. Poverty by Manhattan hedge fund standards. We could have adjusted. moved to a smaller place, sold the car. Cut back, but I couldn't let go. Couldn't admit that I'd fallen. The apartment, the lifestyle, the appearance of success, it was all I had left. I started day trading on my personal account, trying to make up the difference. Lost $40,000 in a month. Took a margin loan to cover it. Lost that too. Took another loan. And another, Rachel didn't know. I hid the statements, made excuses about delayed bonuses. She was so involved with the kitchen, with her Tuesday people, that she didn't press, or maybe she just didn't want to know. 6 months after returning to work, I'd lost everything we had. The savings, the retirement accounts. I'd even borrowed against the apartment, a co-op we'd bought for $2.1 million that was now worth maybe $1.8 in the down market. I owed $400,000 to margin accounts I couldn't cover. The walls were closing in. I started having thoughts I'd never had before. Dark thoughts. Exit strategies that didn't involve bankruptcy lawyers. "You seem distant," Rachel said one night. We were eating takeout Thai food in front of the TV, our version of quality time. "Just work stress," I lied. "David," she muted the TV. "Talk to me. Really talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about." That's not true, and we both know it. I wanted to tell her, wanted to confess everything. The losses, the loans, the fact that we were 2 months away from losing the apartment and everything else, but the words wouldn't come. Pride again. That poison. "I'm fine," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she unmuted the TV. We finished dinner in silence. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. Rachel was at the kitchen. I was alone when I opened the envelope. Failure to pay maintenance fees. Breach of loan covenants. 60 days to vacate, with the words blurred. My hands started shaking again. That old familiar tremor. I walked to my desk. Opened the drawer where I kept the gun. I'd bought it a month ago. Told myself it was for protection. The neighborhood was gentrifying, but still sketchy. That was a lie. I'd bought it for this moment. I sat on the couch, put the gun on the coffee table, stared at it. Everything I'd worked for, gone. Everything I'd sacrificed for, meaningless. I'd destroyed my marriage chasing success. And now I didn't even have the success, just debt and shame. And this gun, I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light to change, for the room to fill with shadows, long enough to pick up the gun, long enough to remember how to disable the safety, long enough to press the barrel against my temple and feel the cold metal against my skin, and that's when someone knocked on the door. I didn't move at first. The knock came again. Firmer this time. I lowered the gun, put it in my lap, waited for whoever it was to go away. "David?" A voice through the door. "David, it's Tommy, from the kitchen." "I need to talk to you, Tommy." What was Tommy doing here? How did he even know where I lived? The knock came a third time. "David, I know you're in there." Rachel gave me the address. Said I should check on you. "Please, son. Open the door, son." Something about that word, the casual tenderness of it, broke something in me. I stood, put the gun back in the drawer, walked to the door like a man underwater. Tommy stood in the hallway holding a paper grocery bag. His coat was wet. When had it started raining? "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked into our 1,800 square foot loft with the confidence of someone who'd never measured his worth by square footage. Set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. Looked around without judgment. "Nice place," he said. "Rachel mentioned you had a view. What are you doing here, Tommy?" He turned to face me. His eyes went to the desk, the drawer that wasn't quite closed all the way. "Rachel's worried about you," he said. "Says you've been different lately, distant. She asked me to talk to you." "Rachel sent you?" Anger flared. "She sent a homeless man to check on me." If the words hurt him, he didn't show it. "She sent a friend." "There's a difference. We're not friends, Tommy. You don't even know me." "I know you're in pain," he said quietly. "I know that look. I've worn that look. Hell, I invented that look. You don't know anything about my life." "You're right. I don't know about your life, but I know about that drawer." He nodded toward the desk. I know about sitting alone in the dark, weighing whether tomorrow is worth the trouble. I know about that math problem that doesn't seem to have any other solution. I said nothing. Want to know how I know? Tommy walked to the window, looked out at the Hudson. Because 12 years ago I sat in a garage with a garden hose running from my exhaust pipe into my truck. Engine running. Door closed. My breath caught. Had it all planned out, he continued. Patricia was gone. Lily was gone. I'd lost the business, the house, everything that made me feel like a man. Figured the world would be better off without one more failure taking up space. What stopped you? Ran out of gas. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Isn't that perfect? Couldn't even afford to fill the tank. Engine sputtered out after 40 minutes. I just sat there, breathing in fumes that weren't quite enough to finish the job, and I started laughing. Couldn't stop laughing. Here I was, failing at the one thing I thought I couldn't fail at, my own exit. He turned to face me. So I got out of the truck, walked to the nearest bridge. Figured I'd jump. But when I got there was this kid, couldn't have been more than 8, fishing with his grandfather. Kid was so excited showing his grandpa this tiny fish he'd caught. The old man was proud as hell, telling the kid he was a natural. And I thought, if I jump, that kid's gonna see. Gonna remember for the rest of his life that he watched a man die instead of watching his grandpa be proud of him. Tommy sat down on our designer couch, so I didn't jump. Walked instead. Walked all night. By morning I was in Manhattan. Been here ever since. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because somebody needs to tell you that the story you're telling yourself, that you're worthless because you lost some money, that you failed because you couldn't maintain some lifestyle, that story is a lie. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand having millions. Don't understand hedge funds or whatever it is you do. But I understand shame. And I understand the difference between who you are and what you own. And I'm here to tell you that you've got those two things confused. I felt something crack inside me. I've lost everything, Tommy. The money, the career, the apartment. I'm about to lose it all. You haven't lost Rachel, he said. Not yet. Not ever, if you stop lying to her. She told me you've been hiding something. Some financial trouble. Said you won't talk to her about it. I looked away. David. His voice was firm now. You think you're protecting her by carrying this alone. But you're not. You're just making her watch you drown from the shore. That's crueler than asking for help. I owe $400,000, I heard myself say. The words spilled out like poison I'd been holding in. Margin loans I can't cover. We're being evicted. I've destroyed everything. Okay, Tommy said. That's a start. What else? What do you mean, what else? Isn't that enough? I mean, what else are you holding on to? Because money problems don't put guns in drawers. Something deeper is eating at you. And there it was. The real question I'd been avoiding. I don't know who I am, I said quietly. Without the job, the money, the success, I don't know what's left. I don't know what I'm for anymore. Tommy nodded slowly. There it is. The real bankruptcy. He stood up, walked to the grocery bag he'd brought, pulled out a thermos. Coffee, he said. Made it at the kitchen this morning. Patricia's recipe. She taught me before she left. Figured you could use some. He poured 2 cups. Handed me one. Sat back down. I'm gonna tell you something, he said. And I need you to really hear it. You ready? I nodded. You've been measuring your life by the wrong scoreboard. The money, the job, the apartment, none of that was ever the point. It was just noise. Just distraction from the real game. What's the real game? Who you are when everything else gets stripped away. How you treat people when there's nothing in it for you. Whether you make the world a little bit better or a little bit worse by being in it. He sipped his coffee. You've been playing checkers while the real game is chess. And you're mad at yourself for losing at checkers. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, watching the rain streak down the windows. Rachel loves you, Tommy said eventually. You know that, right? I know. Then stop punishing her for it. Stop hiding. Stop pretending you're alone in this. I don't know how to ask for help. Sure you do. You open your mouth and say, I need help. It's the easiest thing in the world. And the hardest? More silence. What do I do now? I asked. Now? Tommy stood up. Now you wait for Rachel to get home. And you tell her everything. Every dollar, every lie, every bit of fear you've been carrying. You let her decide if she wants to stay or go. But you give her the truth. She deserves that much. And if she leaves, then you'll survive. That's what people do. We survive. But I don't think she'll leave. I think she's been waiting for you to let her in for a very long time. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. David, one more thing, yeah? That gun in your drawer? Get rid of it. Tonight. I don't care if you throw it in the Hudson or give it to the cops, but get it out of this house. Because tomorrow's coming whether you're ready or not, and you deserve to be here to see it. He left. I sat there holding my coffee cup, staring at the drawer, and I waited for my wife to come home. Rachel came home at 8:47 p.m. I know because I'd been watching the clock since Tommy left, each minute an eternity. I heard her key in the lock, her footsteps in the hallway, the rustle of her coat as she hung it up. David? She called. You home? In here, I managed. She came into the living room, stopped when she saw my face. What's wrong? Immediate concern. What happened? Sit down, I said. Please. She sat on the couch. I sat across from her in the chair. Couldn't be too close for this. Needed distance in case she needed distance. Tommy came by, I started. I know. I asked him to. Why? Because you're disappearing. Her voice cracked. You're physically here, but you're gone. And I'm tired of pretending I don't notice. I'm tired of tiptoeing around whatever you're hiding. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just tell me the truth. Whatever it is, just tell me. So I did. All of it. The demotion I'd hidden. The day trading losses. The margin loans. The mounting debt. The eviction notice that was sitting on my desk. Every word felt like pulling shards of glass from a wound. But I kept going. $400,000, I said. We owe $400,000. And I don't have any way to pay it back. We're going to lose the apartment. Probably have to declare bankruptcy. I've destroyed everything. I waited for her to scream, to cry, to leave. She did none of those things. Why didn't you tell me? She asked quietly, because I was ashamed. Because I failed. Because I'm supposed to be the one who provides, who fixes things, who decided that? She leaned forward. Who decided you had to carry everything alone? When did we stop being a team? When I became dead weight. Stop. Her voice was firm. Stop telling that story. You're not dead weight. You're my husband. You're a human being who made some mistakes. That doesn't make you worthless. We're losing everything, Rachel. We're losing an apartment. She stood up, suddenly animated. An apartment that costs $12,000 a month. An apartment we bought because we thought we were supposed to. Do you even like this place, David? Do you even care about exposed brick and Hudson River views? I blinked. I'd never thought about it. I hate this apartment, she continued. It's cold. It's impersonal. It's a showroom, not a home. I've hated it since the day we moved in, but I never said anything because you seemed so proud of it. You hate it? I hate what it represents. This idea that we're only successful if we're spending money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people we don't even like. She sat back down, took my hands. David, listen to me. I don't care about the apartment. I don't care about the money. What I care about, what I've always cared about, is us. And somewhere in the last 5 years, we lost track of that. What do? I asked. First, we breathe. She squeezed my hands. Second, we figure out exactly what we owe and to whom. Third, we make a plan. Together. It's too much debt. Even bankruptcy might not. Then we start over. We find a smaller place. I get a full-time job. You find something that doesn't destroy you. We build a different life. A better life. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. And that's all we need. Possibility. We sat there, hands linked, until the words I'd been holding back for months finally came out. I was going to kill myself today. Her hands tightened on mine. I know. How? Because I've been watching you disappear for weeks. Because I know what that looks like. My brother, her voice caught. My brother made that choice when I was 17. I've spent 20 years learning to recognize the signs. I'd forgotten about her brother. She'd mentioned him once, years ago. I'd never asked about it, too busy with work to ask about her pain. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be here. Choose to be here. That's all I'm asking." We stayed up until 3 a.m., going through every document, every statement, every piece of the financial wreckage. It was as bad as I thought. Worse, actually, when we laid it all out. But doing it together, having Rachel sit next to me, asking questions, making notes, not judging, made it bearable. "Okay," she said finally, sitting back. "It's bad, but it's not hopeless." How is 400,000 in debt not hopeless? Because we're both alive. We're both healthy. We both have skills and options. That's more than a lot of people have. She looked at me, including most of the people I see at the kitchen every Tuesday. The kitchen. Something occurred to me. "Tommy said you asked him to check on me." "How did he know where we live?" Rachel hesitated. "I've been bringing him here." "What?" "Not inside. To the building. He helps me carry groceries sometimes. We talk in the lobby. He's become a friend." "You've been hanging out with a homeless man in our building?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I heard how they sounded. The casual cruelty of them. Rachel's face hardened. "Yes. I've been spending time with a human being who happens to be unhoused." "Is that a problem for you?" "I didn't mean—" "You did mean it. You meant exactly how it sounded, and that's part of the problem, David. Somewhere along the way, you started measuring people's worth by their bank accounts, including your own." She was right, and I hated that she was right. "Tell me about Tommy," I said. "Really tell me." "I've been going to the kitchen for months, but I don't think I've been paying attention." Rachel's expression softened. She tucked her legs under her on the couch. "Tommy's brilliant," she said. "Not just smart, brilliant. He can look at a broken chair and see exactly how to fix it. Can quote Steinbeck and Hemingway from memory. Makes these terrible puns that somehow become funny because he commits to them so hard." She smiled, lost in the memory. "He asks about my day. Really asks. Remembers details from conversations we had weeks ago. He noticed when I got my hair cut. When I was sad about my friend's miscarriage. He showed up the next Tuesday with these wildflowers he'd found growing in a lot somewhere. Said they reminded him of me, persistent and unexpected. I felt a strange emotion. It took me a moment to recognize it as jealousy. "You sound like you care about him," I said carefully. "I do care about him. He's my friend." She looked at me. "And before you ask, no, there's nothing romantic. He's just a good person who ended up in a bad situation. And he reminds me that there's more to life than the hustle. That kindness matters more than success. I want to meet him," I said. "Really meet him? Not as Rachel's husband doing a charity project. As someone who wants to know him." "You already know him, David. You've been working with him for months." "No, I've been around him." "That's different," Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." We sat in silence for a moment. "What do we do tomorrow?" I asked. "Tomorrow we start over. We call the bank. We talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. We figure out what we can save and what we have to let go. And after that? After that we find a life we actually want to live, instead of the one we thought we were supposed to have." That night I took the gun from my desk drawer, walked outside in the rain, stood on the pedestrian bridge over the West Side Highway, looked at the gun in my hands for a long moment. Then I threw it into the Hudson, watched it disappear into the dark water, felt something in my chest loosen. Not disappear. The pain was still there, the fear, the uncertainty. But it had room to breathe now, room to be something other than unbearable. I walked home through the rain. Rachel was still awake, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." She patted the couch next to her. I sat down. She leaned. The bankruptcy lawyer's office smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. "You're not the first traders I've seen," Michael Brennan said, shuffling through our documents. He was maybe 50, with the tired eyes of someone who'd heard every variation of financial catastrophe. "Won't be the last." The game's designed this way. Unlimited upside, unlimited downside, and somewhere in the middle, people like you. What are our options? Rachel asked. She'd insisted on coming, on being part of every conversation now. No more secrets. Brennan leaned back in his chair. It squeaked. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy will eliminate most of the unsecured debt. The margin loans, credit cards. You'll lose the apartment. That's unavoidable. The co-op board will foreclose. Your credit will be destroyed for 7 to 10 years. And Chapter 13? I asked. Reorganization. You'd keep some assets, but you'd be on a payment plan for 3 to 5 years. Every dollar you make above basic expenses goes to creditors. He looked at me. On your current salary, it might be possible. But it'll be tight. Very tight. Rachel and I exchanged glances. What would you do? She asked him. Brennan smiled sadly. I'd ask myself what I'm trying to save. If it's pride, Chapter 13 will let you say you paid everyone back. If it's your future, Chapter 7 gives you a clean slate faster. How long do we have? I asked, to file. As long as you need. To vacate the apartment? You said 60 days in the eviction notice? I nodded. Then you've got about 6 weeks to decide what you're saving and what you're letting go. We walked out of his office into the October afternoon. The city was alive with people who had places to be, purposes to fulfill. I felt like a ghost among them. 6 weeks, Rachel said. 6 weeks to pack up 5 years of our lives. 5 years of stuff. She corrected. Our lives are coming with us. We stopped at a coffee cart. Rachel ordered tea. I got black coffee. Couldn't afford the fancy drinks anymore. Strange how quickly you recalibrate when you have to. I was thinking, Rachel said as we walked, about what Brennan said, about what we're trying to save, and I don't want to save any of it. The apartment, the furniture, the life we built. I want to start completely fresh. I stopped walking. You mean Chapter 7? I mean more than that. She turned to face me. I mean actually starting over. Different jobs, different neighborhood, different priorities. Rachel, I can't just abandon my career. Your career abandoned you, David. They demoted you. They're counting the days until they can push you out completely. Why are you holding on to something that doesn't want you? The truth of it stung. What else do I know how to do? I asked quietly. I don't know. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we figure it out together. That Tuesday I went to the kitchen with new eyes. Tommy was at the grill flipping pancakes with a precision that spoke of years of practice. Morning, he said when he saw me. No reference to our conversation. No pity in his eyes. Just the easy greeting of someone who'd shown up and expected you to do the same. Morning. Need help? Always. Grab that batter, start a second griddle. We've got 85 on the list today. We worked in silence for a while. The rhythm was soothing. Pour, flip, serve, repeat. No algorithms, no microseconds. Just pancakes and people and the simple math of feeding the hungry. Tommy, I said eventually. That thing you said. About measuring by the wrong scoreboard, yeah? How do you measure now? How do you know if you're doing okay? He flipped 3 pancakes in quick succession. See Marcus over there? I looked. Marcus was at a table helping an older woman cut her pancakes. She was shaking, Parkinson's maybe, and couldn't quite manage the fork. Last week Marcus was in a dark place, Tommy continued. Wouldn't talk to anyone. Wouldn't eat. I was worried about him. But today he's helping Mrs. Chen. No relation, I assume, with her breakfast. That's how I know I'm doing okay, because the people around me are doing a little better than they were yesterday. That's it? That's everything. He looked at me. You're still thinking like a trader, David. Looking for the big score, the clear metric. But life doesn't work that way. Life is small moments strung together. It's Marcus helping Mrs. Chen. It's Jennifer's daughters getting B's on their report cards. It's me standing here making pancakes instead of lying in a bottle somewhere. He slid a stack of pancakes onto a plate, handed them to a young guy with a backpack. You want a scoreboard? Tommy continued. Here it is. Did I make today a little better or a little worse? Did I show up? Did I treat people like they matter? That's the only score that counts in the end. I started spending more time at the kitchen. Not just Tuesdays and Thursdays, every day I could manage. At first I told myself it was just to avoid the apartment, the constant reminder of failure. But that wasn't true. The truth was simpler and more complicated. I was learning how to be a person again. Jennifer taught me how to listen. Really listen, not just wait for my turn to talk. "You do this thing," she said one afternoon. We were sorting donated clothes, where someone's telling you something and you're already formulating your response. I can see it in your eyes. "You're not present." "I'm listening," I protested. "You're hearing." "Different thing." She held up a jacket, checked for tears. "Listening means you're changed by what you hear. Hearing just means the sound waves hit your ears." From then on, I practiced, forced myself to just receive what people were saying without planning my next words. It was harder than any trading strategy I'd ever developed. Marcus taught me about dignity in small things. The kitchen had rules. Everyone who ate there had to bus their own table. Everyone who was able had to help with something. Serving, cleaning, setup, whatever they could manage. Why? I asked Marcus one day. Wouldn't it be easier if volunteers just did everything? Easier, yeah. Better, no. He was washing dishes, his hands red from the hot water. People need to contribute, need to feel useful. You take that away. You take away their dignity. And dignity's the only thing harder to get back than money. I thought about that a lot. About how my whole career had been built on taking, extracting value, capturing inefficiencies, winning by making someone else lose. What had I contributed? What had I built? 4 weeks before we had to leave the apartment, Rachel came home with news. "I got a job offer," she said. I looked up from the laptop where I'd been browsing cheaper apartments in Queens. "Doing what?" "Program director. At the kitchen. It's official now. They got a grant. They can hire someone full-time to coordinate volunteers, manage donations, do outreach." "How much does it pay?" $42,000. I winced. That was less than her student loan debt. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "But David, I want this." "I'm good at it. It matters. We need more than 42,000 to survive. So you'll find something too. We'll make it work." "Doing what?" "I'm a disgraced trader with no other skills." "That's not true, and you know it. You're brilliant with data. You can code. You understand systems. Those skills work lots of places." "Where?" "Who's going to hire someone who crashed out of Wall Street?" Rachel sat down next to me. "You're doing it again. You're making up a story about what's possible before you even try. How about this? Instead of assuming you're unemployable, you actually look." She was right. I'd been so consumed with the bankruptcy, the apartment, the shame, that I hadn't actually tried to imagine what came next. "Okay," I said. "I'll look." "Good." She kissed my cheek. "I'm taking the job. I start in 3 weeks." I spent the next week applying to jobs I was overqualified for and some I was underqualified for. Financial analyst positions, data science roles, even a few teaching jobs at community colleges. The responses were either silence or rejection. My Wall Street pedigree made me too expensive, too risky, too likely to bolt the moment something better came along. On Thursday, Tommy found me at the kitchen, stress-eating pancakes in the corner. "Job hunting going well?" he asked, sitting down across from me. "How'd you know?" "You've got the look." That specific kind of frustration that comes from sending your worth into the void and hearing nothing back. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've got the degrees, the experience. "You're applying to the wrong jobs," Tommy said simply. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to be who you were. You need to figure out who you want to become." He leaned back. "What do you actually want to do, David? Not what pays the most or looks best on a resume. What do you want to spend your days doing?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know," I admitted. "Then that's what you need to figure out. Because you can waste years being successful at something that makes you miserable. Trust me, I know." That night I couldn't sleep. I got up, left Rachel sleeping, and went to the living room. Opened my laptop, started searching, not for jobs, for something else. Data science for nonprofits. Financial literacy programs. Organizations that taught underprivileged kids about money management found one called CityBridge. They worked with high school students in low-income neighborhoods, teaching them basic financial skills, budgeting, saving, understanding credit, avoiding predatory loans. They needed a curriculum developer, someone who understood finance but could explain it clearly, someone who'd seen both sides, wealth and its absence. The pay was $55,000. I stared at the job posting for 20 minutes, then I applied. 2 weeks before we had to vacate the apartment, I got called in for an interview. The CityBridge office was in a repurposed warehouse in Red Hook. No marble lobbies. No Bloomberg terminals. Just a bunch of people in jeans working at standing desks, surrounded by posters of students who'd gone through their programs. The director, Keisha Williams, was maybe 40. Sharp eyes. No-nonsense handshake. "Your resume is interesting," she said. "Not typical for what we do here." "I know. I can explain. I'm not looking for an explanation. I'm looking to understand why someone who made millions wants to teach teenagers about money." I thought about giving her the polished answer. The one about giving back, about using my skills for good. But Tommy's voice was in my head. "Tell the truth." "Because I was one of those teenagers once," I said. First-generation college student. Parents worked 3 jobs between them. I learned about money by making every possible mistake. Thought success meant accumulating as much as possible. Burned my life down chasing that idea. I paused. Keisha waited. "I lost everything recently," I continued. "Filing for bankruptcy. Lost my apartment, my career. And the weird thing is, I'm happier now than I was when I had millions. Because I actually know what matters. And I think I could help kids figure that out before they spend 20 years learning it the hard way." Keisha nodded slowly. "What's the most important thing kids should know about money?" "That it's a tool, not a scoreboard. That it can buy comfort but not meaning. That the real currency is relationships and purpose and knowing who you are when everything else gets stripped away." She smiled. "When can you start?" We moved out of the Tribeca loft on a Saturday in November. The apartment we'd found was in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. 700 square feet, 3rd floor walk-up. Radiator heat that clanged like a protest every morning. Rent was $1,200 a month, a tenth of what we'd been paying. It was perfect. Tommy came to help us move. So did Marcus and Jennifer and half a dozen other people from the kitchen. We loaded everything worth keeping into a rented U-Haul. Some furniture, clothes, books. The few things that actually mattered. Everything else, the designer couch, the West Elm dining table, the art we'd bought because we thought we should, we left for the co-op board to sell. "Traveling light," Tommy said, hefting a box of kitchen supplies. "Feels good," I admitted, and it did. Every box we loaded felt like shedding weight. Years of accumulated expectations and obligations falling away. The new apartment had actual sunlight. The bedroom window faced east, catching the morning sun. The kitchen was tiny but functional. There was a bodega on the corner run by a Yemeni family who knew everyone's name. "It's smaller," Rachel said, standing in the empty living room. "It's enough," I countered. She smiled. "Yeah, it is." We spent the afternoon unpacking. Tommy and Marcus assembled the bed frame, Tommy directing, Marcus executing with the precision of someone who'd once run a professional kitchen. "You got good bones here," Tommy said, inspecting the apartment with a carpenter's eye. "Solid floors, windows that actually open. You know how rare that is." Jennifer brought over a plant. Housewarming gift. It's called a pothos. Impossible to kill. Like resilience in plant form. By evening, the apartment looked lived in. Felt like home in a way the Tribeca place never had. We ordered pizza. Sat on the floor. Our dining table wouldn't arrive until Monday, and ate with people who 6 months ago I would have crossed the street to avoid. "To new beginnings," Rachel said, raising her paper cup of bodega wine. "To second chances," Marcus added. "To showing up," Tommy said, looking at me. I raised my cup. "To finding out who you are when everything else falls apart." We drank. I started at CityBridge on a Monday in December. My first assignment: develop a curriculum for a personal finance class targeting high school juniors and seniors. Kids who'd grown up with nothing and needed to understand how money actually worked before the world chewed them up. Don't make it boring, Keisha warned. These kids have been lectured their whole lives. Make it real, make it matter. I thought about my own journey, the mistakes I'd made, the lessons that came too late. I built the curriculum around stories, not abstract concepts, stories, real scenarios. Maria is 17 and got her first credit card. The limit is $500. She buys a pair of sneakers for $200. How much does she actually owe if she only makes minimum payments? James wants to go to college, but his family can't afford it. He's been offered $100,000 in student loans at 6.5% interest. What will he really pay over 20 years? What else could he do with that money? David made millions on Wall Street and lost it all because he confused net worth with self-worth. How do you measure success in ways that can't be taken away? That last one was new. I added it to the curriculum late one night, sitting at our small kitchen table in Sunset Park. Rachel read it over my shoulder. "You're in the lesson plan," she said. "Too much?" "No, it's perfect. Kids need to know that the successful people they see, the ones who seem to have it figured out, are often the most lost. That failure is survivable, that it's actually the only way to learn what matters." My first class was at a high school in the South Bronx. 32 students, grades 11 and 12. They slouched in their chairs with the particular boredom of teenagers who'd been disappointed too many times. "Who here thinks they're bad at math?" I asked. About half raised their hands. Good news, this class isn't about math. It's about survival, about not making the mistakes I made, about understanding how the game works before you realize you're losing. That got their attention. I told them about my first credit card, how I'd maxed it out in college buying textbooks and pizza, how the $200 balance became $2,400 in interest over 3 years. I told them about my first apartment, how I'd signed a lease without understanding that rent was just the start. Utilities, broker fees, security deposits, all adding up to an amount I couldn't afford. And I told them about Wall Street, about making millions and feeling empty, about measuring my worth by my bonus and losing myself in the process. "You don't have to make my mistakes," I said. "That's why I'm here. To give you the manual I never got." A girl in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Chen, how'd you lose all your money?" Bad decisions, pride, refusing to ask for help when I needed it, and believing that money was the same thing as success. "You regret it?" a boy in the back asked. I thought about it, really thought. "No," I said honestly, because losing everything taught me what I couldn't learn when I had everything. It taught me what matters, and that's worth more than the millions I lost. Teaching was harder than trading ever was. Trading was numbers and patterns and split-second decisions. Teaching was patience and repetition and trying to reach 32, different minds that learned in 32, different ways, but it was also better. When Maria, the quiet girl who sat by the window, came to me after class to say she'd opened her first savings account and deposited $15, I felt something I'd never felt closing $1 million trade. Pride, real pride, the kind that comes from helping someone else win rather than winning yourself. Rachel was thriving at the kitchen. The Grant had expanded their programs. Now they did more than serve breakfast. They offered job training, resume workshops, mental health counseling. They'd helped 6 people find housing in 3 months. Tommy got an apartment, Rachel told me one evening. We were making dinner in our tiny kitchen, moving around each other in the practice dance of people learning to share space. What? When? Last week. The housing program found him a room in a group home in Bushwick. It's not much, shared bathroom, about the size of our bedroom, but it's his. First time he's had a door with a lock in 8 years. That's incredible. He cried when he got the keys, Rachel said softly. Just stood there holding them and crying. Said he never thought he'd have a home again. The bankruptcy went through in January, Chapter 7. Clean slate. All the debt eliminated except Rachel's student loans. Those followed you everywhere, even through bankruptcy. Our credit scores were demolished. We couldn't finance a sandwich, let alone a car or apartment, but we were free. No more debt collectors. No more panic attacks looking at bank statements. No more lying awake calculating how to rob Peter to pay Paul. We had nothing. And everything. How does it feel? Rachel asked the day we got the discharge papers. Light, I said. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. Tommy invited us to see his apartment. The group home was exactly what Rachel described, a converted row house in Bushwick where 6 formerly homeless men lived in individual rooms with shared common spaces. Tommy's room was maybe 10 by 12, twin bed, small desk, dresser, window that looked out at a brick wall. He'd decorated it like a shrine to possibility. Photos of his daughter, the one from his wallet, plus new ones he'd somehow obtained. A bookshelf made from milk crates and boards. A coffee maker. Patricia's recipe tastes better with the right equipment. It's not much, he said, almost apologetically. It's perfect, Rachel said, and it was. Because it was his. Because it represented 8 years of survival culminating in something permanent. Something that couldn't be taken away. Sit, Tommy said, pulling out the desk chair for Rachel, gesturing me toward the bed. He poured coffee into 3 mismatched mugs. We sat in his tiny room, drinking coffee, talking about nothing important. The weather. The kitchen. Rachel's new programs. My students. You look different, Tommy said to me. Different how? Lighter. Like you finally figured out you don't have to carry the world. You taught me that. Nah, I just reminded you. You had to learn it yourself. That spring, something unexpected happened. One of my students, Marcus, no relation to Kitchen Marcus, came to me with a problem. His grandmother had been scammed out of $800 by a predatory payday loan company. She doesn't speak English well, he explained. They told her it was a regular loan, but the interest is 400%. She's paid back $200 and they say she still owes $600. I looked at the paperwork he showed me. Felt the old rage building. The same rage I'd felt on Wall Street, but directed differently now. This is illegal, I said. The interest rate caps in New York are... I stopped. Pulled out my laptop. Started researching. Found a legal aid organization that handled predatory lending cases. Called them. Explained the situation. They took the case. 2 months later, the loan company had to refund everything Marcus's grandmother had paid plus damages. Mr. Chen, Marcus said when he told me the news. You saved my abuela like $2,000. The lawyers did that, I said. Yeah, but you knew how to find them. You knew it was illegal. We didn't know that. We thought that's just how it works. That night I told Rachel about it. You should do more of that, she said. More of what? Use what you know about finance to help people. Not just teach teenagers, actually help people who are being exploited. An idea started forming. I pitched Keisha on a new program, Financial Advocacy for Families. We teach the kids, I said. But their parents are getting crushed by predatory loans, hidden fees, scams they don't understand. What if we help them too? We don't have funding for that. What if I did it as a volunteer? Nights and weekends. We could start small, see if it works. Keisha studied me. You know you're already underpaid and overworked, right? I know, but this matters. And I'm good at it, she smiled. Okay, try it. But the moment it interferes with your actual job, we talk. I started running financial advocacy sessions twice a month. Evening workshops at the kitchen, taught people how to read contracts, how to spot payday loan scams, how to negotiate medical debt, how to file complaints against predatory companies. Used everything I'd learned on Wall Street, understanding financial instruments, reading the fine print, knowing how the system worked, but inverted. Instead of exploiting people, I was teaching them how to avoid being exploited. You're like Robin Hood, Jennifer said after one session, except instead of stealing from the rich, you're teaching the poor how not to be robbed. It felt good. Better than good. For the first time in my life, I was using my skills to make things more fair instead of less fair. Tommy came to every session, sat in the back, asked questions, took notes. Why do you come? I asked him once. You already know this stuff. Some of it, he admitted. But I'm learning. And besides, I like watching you teach. You're good at it. You care. I never cared on Wall Street. That's not true. You cared. You just cared about the wrong things. Now you care about the right things. That's not a small change, David. That's it. June brought heat that made the city shimmer and a letter that changed everything. The envelope was addressed to Tommy, forwarded from the kitchen to his group home. He brought it to the Tuesday morning shift with shaking hands. I don't know if I can open it, he said. We were in the kitchen storage room taking inventory of canned goods. Just the two of us. Who's it from? I asked. My daughter Lily. His voice cracked on her name. I haven't heard from her in 9 years. Not since Patricia took her and left. He held the envelope like it might disintegrate. You want me to leave? I offered. No, stay. He trailed off. I need a witness, someone to confirm this is real. He opened it carefully, pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in looping handwriting. Started to read, and then his knees buckled. I caught him, helped him sit on a crate of tomato sauce. What does it say? He handed me the letter. His hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. Dear Dad, I don't know if you'll get this. Mom said you didn't want to be found, but I found you anyway. It took 3 years and a private investigator I saved up for. I'm 18 now, just graduated high school, going to SUNY New Paltz in the fall for architecture. Turns out I still want to build things like you taught me. Mom told me you chose the streets over us, but I never believed her. I remembered how you used to look at me like I was the best thing you'd ever built. Men who look at their daughters that way don't just leave. So I looked for you, and I found you, and I need you to know, I don't blame you for what happened. I understand better now. The economy, the recession, how fast everything can fall apart. I'd like to see you, if you want to see me. No pressure. I miss my dad. I miss learning carpentry in your workshop. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss you. There's a coffee shop near campus. Muddy Waters on Main Street. I'll be there every Saturday at 2 p.m. for the rest of the summer. Just in case. Love, Lily. P.S. I'm building a coffee table for my dorm room. I keep asking myself what you'd do. Turns out you taught me better than I remembered. Tommy cried in that storage room for 20 minutes. Not sad crying. Not quite happy crying either. Something beyond both. The sound of a man whose heart was remembering how to beat again. She doesn't hate me, he kept saying. She doesn't hate me. She loves you, I said. That's clear in every word. I can't go. What? Why not? Look at me, David. He gestured at himself. His clothes were clean but worn. His shoes were held together with glue. I'm homeless. I live in a group home. I can't see my daughter like this. Tommy, she doesn't care about... I care. His voice rose. I care that the last time she saw me I was her father. A carpenter. Someone who built things. Now He gestured helplessly. You're the same person. No, I'm not. That man had dignity, had purpose, had something to offer his daughter beyond apologies and explanations. That night, I told Rachel about the letter. He has to go, she said immediately. He won't. He's ashamed. Then we help him not be ashamed. She was already thinking. I could see it in her eyes. What does he need? Really need? Confidence. Some way to feel like he's not showing up empty-handed. What if he's not empty-handed? What if he brings something? Like what? Like the table Lily's building. What if Tommy helps her finish it? What if that's their reconnection? Doing the thing they used to do together. It was brilliant. Typical Rachel brilliant. How do we make that happen? I asked. We ask him. We offer to drive him. We make it impossible for him to say no. Wednesday morning I found Tommy at the kitchen. I want to take you to see Lily, I said. David, hear me out. Rachel and I will drive you. This Saturday, we'll wait in the car while you two talk. And you're going to bring tools. Tools? Lily said she's building a coffee table. You're going to offer to help her finish it. You're going to show up as her father, the carpenter who taught her how to build things. That's who you are, Tommy, not the guy who fell on hard times. The guy who builds. He was quiet for a long time. I don't have tools anymore, he finally said. Sold them years ago. Then we get you tools. That afternoon, I went to a hardware store in Sunset Park. Used money Rachel and I had been saving for a better couch. Bought a good hammer, a set of chisels, a hand plane, sandpaper in various grits, wood glue, a measuring tape, a carpenter's pencil, and a small toolbox to carry it all. $340, more than we could afford, less than it was worth. I brought it to Tommy's room that evening. David, I can't accept this. You're not accepting it. You're borrowing it. For Saturday. For Lily. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm asking you to see your daughter. I'm asking you to show up. That's payment enough. He sat on his bed looking at the tools like they were holy relics. You're a good friend, he said quietly. You saved my life, I replied. Literally. This is just tools. Saturday came with perfect summer weather. Rachel and I picked Tommy up at his group home at 10 a.m. The drive to New Paltz was 90 minutes. Tommy didn't speak for the first hour. What if she changed her mind? He finally said. What if she's not there? Then we wait until she is, Rachel said from the driver's seat. We've got all day, all summer, however long it takes. What if I don't know what to say? Start with I love you, I offered. The rest will come. Muddy Waters was a typical college town coffee shop. Vintage furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of espresso and possibility. We got there at 1:30 p.m., parked across the street. You should go in, I told Tommy. What if she's not there yet? Then you order coffee and wait. Like a normal person. He took a deep breath, picked up the toolbox. You got this, Rachel said. He got out of the car, crossed the street, disappeared into the coffee shop. Rachel and I sat in the car watching the door. Think this works out? I asked. I think it already has, Rachel said. Lily reached out. Tommy showed up. That's the hard part. Everything else is just conversation. At 1:55, a young woman walked up to the coffee shop. Early 20s. Brown hair in a ponytail, wearing carpenter pants and a t-shirt from some band I didn't know. She had Tommy's eyes, that same sharp awareness. She paused outside the door, took a breath, went inside. Rachel squeezed my hand. We waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The afternoon heat made the car stifling even with the windows down. Should we check on them? I asked. No. Let them have this. At 4:30, the coffee shop door opened. Tommy and Lily came out together. They were laughing about something. Tommy had his arm around her shoulders. She was carrying the toolbox. They walked to a beat-up Honda Civic parked down the street. Talked for another 10 minutes. Then hugged. A long hug that even from across the street I could feel the weight of. Lily got in her car, drove away. Tommy stood on the sidewalk watching until she disappeared. Then he turned and walked back to our car. When he got in, his face was wet with tears. How'd it go? Rachel asked gently. We're having dinner next Saturday, he said, and I'm helping her finish the table next Sunday. And she wants me to come to her graduation party in August. And she called me Dad. She called me Dad, and it felt like coming home after a very long trip. On the drive back, Tommy told us everything. How Lily had shown him pictures of the table she was building, ambitious design, challenging joinery, exactly the kind of project he would have assigned her. How she'd asked him to look at her plans and make suggestions. How they'd talked about the years apart without blame. Just acknowledgement that life sometimes breaks families and it takes time to put them back together. How her mother had remarried. A good man, Tommy said, no bitterness. But Lily had always felt like something was missing. She said I taught her to see the world as something she could build, Tommy told us. That's why she's studying architecture. Because I taught her that broken things can be fixed and new things can be made. You did that, Rachel said. I thought I'd ruined her. Thought she'd hate me for failing. Kids don't need perfect parents, I said, thinking of my own father, a good man who'd worked himself into an early grave. They need real ones, ones who show up. You showed up, Tommy. That night, Rachel and I lay in bed in our small apartment. Today was good, she said. Today was perfect. Think they'll be okay? Tommy and Lily? I think they're already okay. Everything else is just details. Rachel rolled over to face me. You know what you did, right? What? You gave someone back their life. You used money you didn't have to buy, tools Tommy didn't think he deserved, so he could show up for a daughter who never stopped loving him. That's more than you did in your entire Wall Street career. I thought about that. About the millions I'd moved, the deals I'd executed, the wealth I'd accumulated and lost. Wall Street taught me how to extract value, I said. Tommy taught me how to create it. Rachel kissed me. I'm proud of you. The man you've become. I'm proud of us. Of what we're building. What are we building? I thought about our tiny apartment. Our small paychecks. Our big purpose. Something that matters, I said. Summer turned the city into a furnace, and my student workshops turned into something unexpected. Word spread. Not through official channels, through the network of people who knew people who needed help. Suddenly, I wasn't just teaching teenagers. I was fielding calls at 9 p.m. from a single mother in Queens who'd been hit with hospital bills she couldn't decipher. From an elderly man in the Bronx whose mortgage had been sold to a company demanding payments he'd already made. You need to set boundaries, Rachel warned. You're working 60 hours a week and half of it is unpaid. I know. But they need help. And you need sleep. You're no good to anyone if you burn out again. She was right, but saying no felt impossible when the alternative was watching people drown in financial quicksand. I knew how to escape. Marcus, Kitchen Marcus, pulled me aside one Tuesday morning. You're doing too much, he said. You sound like my wife. Your wife is smart. Listen to her. He was chopping vegetables with the precision of someone who'd spent decades in professional kitchens. You know what killed my restaurant? Wasn't the debt. Wasn't even my wife's cancer. It was me refusing to ask for help, thinking I had to carry everything alone. This is different. It's exactly the same. You're good at this financial advocacy thing. Really good. But one person can't solve everyone's problems. You need to build something bigger than yourself. Like what? I don't know, but figure it out before you figure out how to have another breakdown. That night, I lay awake thinking about what Marcus said. He was right. I was drowning again. Different ocean, same inability to ask for help. But what would something bigger look like? An idea started forming, hazy at first, then sharper. What if I trained other people to do what I was doing? What if, instead of being the person who helped, I became the person who taught others how to help? I could develop a curriculum. Train volunteers. Create a network of financial advocates across the city. I pitched the idea to Keisha the next morning. It's ambitious, she said. How would you fund it? Grants? Donations? I don't know. I've never built a nonprofit before. Good thing I have, she smiled. Let me make some calls. By September, we had a plan. CityBridge would sponsor a pilot program, Financial Justice Fellowship. 6-month training program for community advocates who wanted to help people navigate financial exploitation. Keisha found a small foundation grant, $30,000. Enough for me to run the pilot part-time while keeping my teaching job. We recruited our first cohort, 12 people. Some were from the kitchen, people who'd been on the receiving end of predatory practices and wanted to fight back. Some were social workers who saw their clients drowning in debt. One was a lawyer who'd left corporate practice and wanted to do something meaningful. And one was Tommy. You sure about this? I asked him when he applied. It's a big commitment. David, you gave me tools to reconnect with my daughter. Let me learn tools to help people the way you helped me. How could I say no to that? The first session was in October. In a classroom at the kitchen, I'd prepared a whole curriculum. Lesson plans, handouts, PowerPoint slides. I got through about 15 minutes before I realized I was teaching it wrong. These weren't students who needed lectures. They were people who'd lived through financial trauma and wanted to prevent others from experiencing the same. I closed my laptop. "Forget the slides," I said. "Tell me about the worst financial situation you've ever been in." The room went quiet. Then Jennifer spoke up. "I lost everything because I couldn't read English well enough to understand a lease. I thought I was signing a 1-year rental agreement. Turned out it was a rent-to-own contract with so many hidden fees that by month 3, I owed more than the apartment was worth. When I couldn't pay, they evicted me. That's how I ended up homeless with my daughters. I declared bankruptcy 3 times," a woman named Cherise said. "Not because I was irresponsible, because I kept getting sick and insurance kept denying claims. Every time I got back on my feet, another medical crisis would bury me." Story after story. Each one a testament to a system designed to extract rather than support. "This is your curriculum," I told them. "Your experiences, your survival. That's what makes you qualified to help others. Not some certificate I can give you. The fact that you've been there and made it through." Tommy raised his hand. "So what do we actually do? How do we take what happened to us and turn it into help for someone else?" "We learn the systems," I said. "The laws, the loopholes, the advocacy channels. Then we combine that knowledge with your lived experience. That's what makes you powerful. You understand both the technical and the human side." Over the next 6 months, I taught them everything I knew. How to read contracts and spot predatory clauses. How to negotiate medical debt. How to file complaints with regulatory agencies. How to help someone weigh bankruptcy options. How to advocate for clients with limited English proficiency. But they taught me just as much. They taught me that solutions couldn't be one size fits all. That cultural context mattered. That trust had to be earned, especially with communities that had been exploited and ignored for generations. Cherise taught me about the medical debt system, how hospitals would send bills to collection agencies within 30 days, destroying credit scores before people even knew they owed money. She'd developed her own system for negotiating with hospitals, getting bills reduced by 60–70%. Jennifer taught me about language access, how people with limited English were systematically targeted by scams because they couldn't advocate for themselves. She created a multilingual guide to financial rights that we started distributing through immigrant community centers. Tommy taught me about dignity, how helping someone wasn't about fixing their problems. It was about giving them tools to fix their own problems. "You can't rescue people," he told the group one day. "I learned that the hard way. You can walk beside them. You can show them the path. But they have to take the steps themselves. Otherwise, you're just creating different dependency." By March, our first cohort was ready. We set up a weekly financial advocacy clinic at the kitchen. Every Thursday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. Free financial help for anyone who needed it. The first night we had 4 people show up. The second week, 8. By week 6, we had a waiting list. People came with crushing debt, predatory loans, wage theft, benefits denials, evictions. Every kind of financial crisis you could imagine. And our advocates helped them. Not all of them. Some problems were too big, too entrenched. But enough. Enough that word spread. Enough that people started believing help was possible. One Thursday in April, a young couple came to the clinic. David and Maria Gonzalez, early 30s, both working 2 jobs, drowning in payday loans they'd taken out to cover a medical emergency. "We owe $4,000, David told Jennifer, who was working their case. "But we've already paid back $6,000. They keep saying we need to pay more." Jennifer looked at their paperwork. I was supervising, standing nearby in case she needed help. "This is illegal," she said immediately. "The interest rate they're charging violates New York usury laws. You don't owe them anything. In fact, they owe you a refund." "Are you sure?" Maria asked. "They said if we don't pay, they'll sue us." "They're lying. Empty threats to scare you into paying money you don't legally owe. Jennifer pulled out a template we'd developed. We're going to file a complaint with the Department of Financial Services and the Attorney General's office. We're also going to send them a cease and desist letter. If they contact you again, it's harassment, and they can be fined. The couple looked stunned. How much does this cost? David asked. Nothing. It's free. Why? Jennifer smiled. Because I was you 5 years ago. Someone helped me. Now I help you. That's how it works. I watched Jennifer work with the Gonzalezes for the next hour, explaining their rights, filling out complaint forms, coaching them on what to say if the loan company contacted them. This was what I'd been trying to build. Not me as the savior. A community of people who'd survived helping others survive. After the couple left, Jennifer turned to me. Did I do okay? She asked. You were perfect. You didn't just solve their problem. You gave them their power back. That's everything. I learned from the best, she said. I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just needed permission to use it. That spring, Tommy saw Lily every other weekend. He'd take the bus to New Paltz. They'd work on projects. Together, she was building furniture for her dorm room, and he was teaching her advanced joinery techniques. She wants me to meet her mother, he told me one Tuesday. Patricia, how do you feel about that? Terrified. He cracked eggs into a bowl. She left me because I couldn't provide. What if she looks at me now and sees the same failure? Tommy, you're not the same person who lost everything. You're someone who survived losing everything. That's different. Is it enough? It's more than enough. You're Lily's father. You're housed. You're working. You're helping people. You showed up when it mattered. That's what Patricia will see. 2 weeks later, Tommy had dinner with Lily and Patricia. He told me about it the next day at the kitchen, while we prepped vegetables. Patricia looks good, he said. Happy. Her new husband treats her well. They live in a nice house upstate. She's got a garden. She always wanted a garden. How was it, seeing her? Weird, like visiting a version of my life that could have been but wasn't. We were married for 15 years, David. You don't just forget that. Did she ask about everything? Yeah. I told her the truth. About the streets, the shelters, the group home. She cried. Apologized for leaving. What did you say? I said I didn't blame her. That she did what she had to do to protect Lily. That I would have done the same thing. He paused. And I meant it. I really did. That's growth, Tommy. That's survival. Growth is what comes after. In May, Keisha called me into her office. The foundation is impressed with the pilot, she said. They want to fund a full program, 3-year grant, enough to hire you full-time as director and bring on 2 program coordinators. I sat down. Full-time? You'd have to leave your teaching position. I know that's a hard choice. It's not hard, I interrupted. Those kids, my students, they're why I got into this. But training advocates who can help hundreds of families, that's bigger than anything I could do alone. So that's a yes? That's a yes. When I told Rachel that night, she cried. Happy tears, she assured me. You found it, David, the thing you're meant to do. We found it, I corrected. None of this happens without you bringing me to that kitchen. Without Tommy showing up at our door, without all of it. No, she said. You chose to show up. You chose to change. The Financial Justice Fellowship became my full-time work in July. We moved into a small office in the same building as the kitchen. 2 rooms, donated furniture, a coffee maker that only worked half the time. It was perfect. I hired 2 program coordinators, Jennifer, who'd become our expert on immigrant financial rights, and a former social worker named Terrence who specialized in housing issues. Our second cohort started in September with 20 applicants. We could only take 12. But the fact that 20 people wanted to become financial advocates felt like validation. Tommy enrolled in the second cohort even though he'd finished the first. I want to go deeper, he explained. Learn the legal side better. Maybe become a trainer myself eventually. You're already helping me train, I pointed out. Then make it official. Let me be useful. How could I say no? By October, we were running 3 advocacy clinics a week across different neighborhoods. Our advocates had helped over 200 families navigate financial crises. The work was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Every success felt like redemption. Every case we couldn't solve felt like failure, even though I knew we couldn't fix everything. You're doing it again, Rachel observed one night. I'd been stress-eating ice cream and obsessing over a case we'd lost. A family facing eviction we couldn't stop. Doing what? Measuring yourself by outcomes you can't control. You helped them apply for emergency housing assistance. You connected them with legal aid. You did everything possible. The fact that the system failed them isn't your fault. But they're still being evicted. Yes, and that's tragic. But it doesn't erase the 50 other families who aren't being evicted because of your program. You can't save everyone, David. That's not the job. The job is showing up and fighting. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but you keep showing up. She was right, as usual. In November, something happened that changed the trajectory of everything. A reporter from the New York Times contacted us. She'd heard about the program through someone we'd helped. Wanted to do a story on financial advocacy in underserved communities. I don't know, I told Keisha. Media attention feels risky. Why? Because what if they dig into my background? Find out I'm a failed hedge fund trader who lost millions? That doesn't exactly scream credibility. Keisha laughed. David, that's exactly why you have credibility. You're not some do-gooder who read about poverty in a book. You lived through losing everything. That's your story. Don't run from it. The reporter, Amanda Chen, no relation, came to observe a clinic night. She watched Jennifer help a family understand their mortgage modification options. Watched Terrence negotiate with a landlord to prevent an eviction. Watched Tommy explain to an elderly woman how to spot and report Social Security scams. Then she interviewed me. Tell me your story, she said. How does someone go from Wall Street to running a nonprofit? I took a breath. Decided to trust Keisha's instinct, told her everything. The trading career, the millions made and lost, the panic attack, the bankruptcy, the gun, Tommy knocking on the door. Tommy saved my life, I said. Then he taught me how to live it. Everything I do now is trying to pay that forward. Is he here? Can I interview him? I found Tommy in the kitchen making coffee for clients waiting to be seen. Reporter wants to talk to you, I said. Me? Why? Because you're the reason any of this exists. Tommy's interview was better than mine. He told Amanda about losing his business, his family, his home, about the years on the streets, about the day he almost gave up and the reasons he didn't. David thinks I saved him, Tommy said, but that's not how it worked. We saved each other. He gave me a reason to believe helping people mattered. I gave him a reason to believe he mattered beyond his bank account. That's not salvation. That's friendship. Amanda scribbled notes furiously. What do you want people to know about homelessness? She asked. Tommy thought for a moment. That it's not a character flaw. It's a failure of systems. Most people are one bad break away from where I was. Medical emergency, job loss, divorce. The safety net has holes big enough to lose your whole life through. Our job isn't to judge people for falling through. It's to help them climb back out. The article ran in December, right before Christmas. Front page of the Metro section, from Wall Street to food banks, how financial crisis survivors are fighting predatory lending. There was a photo of Tommy and me at the clinic, looking at paperwork with a client. Another of Jennifer teaching a workshop. A sidebar with statistics on predatory lending in low-income communities, and my whole story. All of it. The rise, the fall, the redemption. I was terrified of how people would react. The article went viral. Not nationally, It was still a local story. But locally, it exploded. We got emails from people wanting help, from people wanting to volunteer, from foundations asking about funding, from other cities asking how to replicate the program. My phone rang constantly for a week. I did 3 radio interviews, 2 podcast appearances, and 1 local TV segment. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable. I didn't become an advocate to be famous. I became an advocate because I didn't know how else to live with what I'd learned. But the attention had an upside. Resources. 2 foundations offered grants totaling $200,000. Enough to expand the program. Hire more staff, open more clinics. You did it, Rachel said, reading the grant letters. We did it. This whole thing, it's all of us. You, Tommy, the advocates, everyone. Don't discount yourself. You built this. You made it real. Christmas that year was small and perfect. We spent it with Tommy at his group home. He'd invited Lily and Patricia and her husband Greg. We cooked dinner together in the communal kitchen. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, salad, garlic bread. The kind of meal that tastes better because of who you're eating it with. Lily brought the coffee table she'd finished, the one she and Tommy had built together. It was beautiful. Real craftsmanship. Tommy nearly cried seeing it completed. This is my family, Tommy said, looking around the table. Not just blood family, all of you. The family I built after everything fell apart. We raised our glasses of cheap wine. To second chances, Patricia said. To showing up, I added. To building something better than what broke, Tommy said. We drank. That winter, the program continued to grow. We trained our 3rd cohort in January. Opened 2 new clinic locations. Developed specialized workshops on specific issues. Medical debt, student loans, wage theft, immigration-related financial exploitation. Jennifer created a program specifically for non-English speakers. Terrence launched a tenants' rights initiative. Tommy started a peer support group for people recovering from homelessness. Not therapy, just space for people who understood. Each program was shaped by the person running it, by their lived experience, by what they wished had existed when they needed help. This is what systems change looks like, Keisha told me during a check-in meeting. Not some massive policy shift from above, just people who've been hurt by a system helping others navigate it, one person at a time. Feels small sometimes, I admitted. We help a few hundred families a year. There are millions struggling. You're not trying to help millions. You're trying to create a model that can be replicated. You're proving it works. Other cities are already reaching out to learn from you. That's scale, David. Just slower than Wall Street. In March, I got an unexpected email from my old managing director at Silverman & Cross. David, read the Times article. Impressive work. I wanted to reach out because we're launching a corporate social responsibility initiative and looking for nonprofit partners. Would you be open to a conversation? Best, Richard, I stared at the email for 10 minutes. My first instinct was to delete it. Wall Street had taken enough from me. I didn't want anything from that world. But then I thought about what Tommy would say. About staying open to possibilities. About not letting past wounds dictate future choices. I replied, happy to talk. What did you have in mind? We met for coffee the following week. Richard looked older than I remembered. More gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes. The job aged you. You look good, he said. Different. Lighter somehow. I'm not carrying millions in other people's money anymore. That helps, he smiled. Fair point. He sipped his coffee. I'll cut to the chase. The firm has a new initiative, investing in community development. Part genuine altruism, part PR, part tax strategy. We're looking to fund programs that align with our values. Since when does Silverman & Cross have values beyond profit? Ouch, but fair. He didn't bristle. Look, the firm has issues. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there are people there, myself included, who want to do some good with the money we make. Your program is exactly the kind of thing we want to support. How much are we talking about? $500,000 over 2 years. Potentially renewable. I nearly spit out my coffee. 500,000? You'd have to agree to some terms. Quarterly reports, annual impact assessment. We'd want to promote the partnership. Absolutely not. Richard blinked. What? I'm not going to be your PR strategy. I'm not going to help you whitewash the fact that hedge funds like yours are part of why people need programs like mine. David, no. Listen. The predatory loans we help people escape, often backed by private equity firms. The medical debt we negotiate, often sold to collections agencies funded by hedge funds. The wage theft we fight, companies trying to maximize shareholder value. You're offering me money to fix problems your industry creates. That's not charity. That's a protection racket. Richard was quiet for a long moment. You're not wrong, he finally said. I know I'm not wrong. I lived it. I was it. So what do you want me to do with the money? Keep it? I thought about that. $500,000 could change everything for the program. More advocates, more clinics, more families helped, but at what cost? I need to think about it, I said. Talk to my team. We'll make a decision together. I brought Richard's offer to the team on Thursday, laid out the numbers, the terms, the ethical complications. $500,000 is life-changing money for us, Jennifer said. We could expand to every borough, hire dedicated legal support, actually, pay our advocates what they're worth instead of stipends. But it comes from the same system that creates our clients' problems. Terrence countered. Doesn't that compromise our mission? Does it? Tommy asked. Or does it redistribute wealth from people who extracted it to people who need it? Isn't that exactly what we're trying to do? There's a difference between redistribution and complicity, I said. Is there? Tommy pressed. David, you used Wall Street knowledge to build this program. You're already using their tools against them. Why not use their money too? Because taking their money gives them power over us. What if they don't like something we do? What if we advocate for policy changes that hurt their bottom line? Then we include provisions in the contract protecting our independence. Jennifer suggested. No control over programming, no veto power over advocacy positions, just funding with transparency requirements. We debated for 2 hours. In the end, we put it to a vote. The team was split. 6-5 in favor of taking the money with strict independence provisions. I'm abstaining, I said. This decision is too important for me to make alone. Majority rules. I met with Richard again to negotiate terms. We'll take the funding under these conditions, I told him. You have zero input on programming, zero influence over advocacy positions. If we decide to publicly oppose policies your firm supports, we can. You're listed as a funder, nothing more. And if at any point we feel the relationship is compromising our mission, we can return the remaining funds and walk away. Those are harsh terms. Those are the only terms. Take them or don't. He studied me. You've changed, David. The old you would have taken the money and figured out the ethics later. The old me nearly killed himself. I'm not interested in his decision-making process. Richard laughed. Fair enough. I'll run it by the board, but I think they'll agree. Having our name on your work, even without control, is valuable to us. Why? Because what you're doing matters, and some of us want to be associated with things that matter, even if we're also associated with things that don't. That's surprisingly honest. I'm old enough to admit when I'm participating in a broken system while trying to make it slightly less broken. That's not heroic, but it's something. The funding came through in April. We used it carefully. Hired 3 full-time staff. Expanded to clinics in all 5 boroughs. Created a legal fund for cases that needed representation beyond advocacy. But we also stayed true to our values. When the firm lobbied against stricter payday lending regulations, we published an op-ed supporting them. When they fought against transparency and private equity, we went on record opposing them. Richard called me after the first public disagreement. You're not making this easy, he said. We told you we wouldn't. That was the deal. I know. And weirdly, the board respects it. They knew what they were signing up for. Why do you keep funding us? I asked. Genuinely. What's in it for you beyond PR? He was quiet for a moment. You want the real answer? Always. Because watching you build this made me realize how empty my career feels. I make millions moving money around. At the end of the day, what have I built? Nothing real, nothing that helps anyone. You lost everything and built something that matters. That's success, David. The kind I'll never have. You could leave, do something else. I'm 56 years old with kids in private school and a mortgage on a Hamptons house. I'm trapped by choices I made 20 years ago. But funding your work? That's the closest I'll get to mattering. So yeah, we keep funding you, even when you make us look bad. Because you're doing what I wish I had the courage to do. That conversation stayed with me. Richard was me. Or who I would have been if I hadn't crashed out. Still chasing money. Still measuring worth by bank balances. Still empty. I'd thought losing everything was the worst thing that could happen. But staying in that life, that would have been worse. Tommy got his own apartment in May. Not a group homeroom. An actual studio apartment in Bushwick. Small, but his. Kitchen, bathroom, Murphy bed that folded into the wall. We helped him move in on a Saturday. There wasn't much to move. He'd accumulated very little in his time at the group home, but what he had, he carried with pride. First place that's really mine in 11 years, he said, standing in the empty studio. 11 years. Lily had driven down from New Paltz with Patricia. They'd brought a coffee table. One Lily had built specifically for Tommy's new place. I used everything you taught me, she told him. It's not perfect, but it's mine. It's perfect because you made it, Tommy said. He was crying. Again. Tommy cried easily now, said it was making up for years of refusing to feel anything. We spent the afternoon helping him set up. Assembled the few pieces of furniture he'd gotten from a second-hand store, hung pictures on the walls, photos of Lily, of the kitchen crew, of the Tuesday morning regulars who'd become family. By evening, the studio looked like a home. Speech, Marcus announced. He'd brought over homemade lasagna for dinner. Tommy needs to make a speech in his new place. Tommy stood in the center of his tiny apartment, surrounded by people who loved him. I don't know what to say except thank you. For not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself. For showing me that home isn't a place, it's people. For proving that falling down isn't the same as staying down. He looked at Lily. You made me want to be worth finding. He looked at me and Rachel. You made me believe I could help instead of just being helped. He looked at the room full of people. You made me family when I thought family was something I'd lost forever. We stayed late into the night, eating lasagna, drinking cheap wine, telling stories, building the kind of memories that turn a space into a home. In June, we hit a milestone. Our advocates had helped 1,000 families. 1,000 families who'd negotiated medical debt, escaped predatory loans, avoided eviction, understood their rights, fought back against exploitation. We celebrated at the kitchen with cake and speeches. Jennifer talked about the woman who'd come to her clinic barely speaking English, drowning in payday loan debt. How they'd worked together to understand her rights. How the woman had eventually become an advocate herself, helping others in her community. Terrence talked about the family of 5 facing eviction who'd lived in their car for 2 weeks. How he'd helped them navigate emergency housing assistance. How they were now stably housed and the father had gotten a job paying enough to save for the first time in his life. Tommy talked about a man who'd come to the clinic, suicidal. Showed Tommy the same kind of darkness Tommy had carried for years. How Tommy had sat with him, shared his story, connected him with resources. how that man was now housed and working and breathing. "We don't just change financial situations," Tommy said. "We change stories. We take stories of hopelessness and help people write new chapters. That's not charity. That's revolution. Small, quiet, one person at a time, but revolution nonetheless." Rachel had news that night. We were walking home from the celebration. Summer evening. Brooklyn glowing in that golden hour light. "I'm pregnant," she said. I stopped walking. "What?" "Pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out this morning. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to wait until we were alone. To have this moment just be ours before it became everyone's." I pulled her close. Felt tears on my face. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." We stood on the sidewalk, holding each other, while the city moved around us. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too. What if I mess this up? What if I'm a terrible father?" "Then you'll be a terrible father who shows up, who tries, who loves them." "That's enough, David. That's more than enough." We told Tommy first. He was at his apartment, working on a bookshelf for Lily's new place at school. "You're going to be an uncle," Rachel told him. "Uncle?" He looked confused. "Not technically, but family isn't technical. You're our family, which makes you this baby's uncle." Tommy set down his tools, sat on his couch, put his face in his hands. "I never thought I'd be part of another family," he said, voice muffled. "Never thought I'd get to see kids grow up, be part of their lives. You're giving me something I thought I'd lost forever." "You gave us something we thought we'd lost forever," I said. "This is just paying it forward." I thought about the man I'd been 3 years ago, the one measuring worth in dollars, the one who'd held a gun to his head, the one who thought losing money meant losing everything. That man had no idea what was coming. The bankruptcy, the small apartment, the nonprofit work, the community, the purpose, the life that only became possible after everything fell apart. I wouldn't go back, wouldn't trade this life, this small, meaningful, sufficient life, for anything Wall Street could offer. Because I'd finally learned what Tommy had tried to teach me from the beginning. The scoreboard doesn't matter. The game is people, and I was finally winning. The baby came in February during a snowstorm. We named her Elena after Rachel's grandmother. 6 pounds, 7 ounces, perfect tiny fingers, lungs that worked perfectly. We knew because she used them enthusiastically. Tommy was the first visitor at the hospital. He brought a mobile he'd made himself, hand-carved animals suspended on thin wire. Bear, deer, rabbit, owl. "I made this for Lily when she was born," he said, his voice thick. "Been carrying it around for years, waiting for someone to give it to. Seems like Elena should have it," Rachel cried. I cried. Tommy cried. The nurse who came to check vitals looked uncomfortable with all the emotion. "We're fine," I assured her. "Just happy." "I can see that," she said, smiling. Parenthood rewrote everything I thought I knew about time. Days disappeared into feeding schedules and diaper changes and trying to function on 90-minute sleep cycles. My concept of productivity, already recalibrated from Wall Street, shifted again. Success wasn't launching new programs or helping more families. Success was Elena sleeping for 3 consecutive hours. Was Rachel getting a shower? Was both of us remembering to eat actual meals? "You need to take paternity leave," Keisha told me when I tried to come back to work after 2 weeks. "We're in the middle of expanding to the Bronx, and we'll continue expanding while you're gone. Jennifer and Terrence can handle it. The program doesn't collapse without you. That's the point of building something sustainable. But go home, David. Be with your family. The world will still need fixing when you get back." She was right. I took 6 weeks. Stayed home with Rachel and Elena, learned how to swaddle properly, how to decipher different cries, how to function on sleep deprivation that made my Wall Street hours look civilized. Tommy came over twice a week, brought groceries, held Elena while Rachel napped. Taught me things my own father never had the chance to teach me. He died when I was 25, worked himself into a heart attack at 53. You're a natural, I told Tommy one afternoon. He was rocking Elena, humming something soft. Had practice with Lily. Some things you don't forget. He looked down at Elena's sleeping face. She's lucky, you know. How so? She's got parents who already learned the hard lessons, who know that money isn't love. That being present matters more than being perfect. That's a gift, David. You're giving her a childhood you didn't get. I thought about my own childhood. Immigrant parents working constantly, always stressed about money. Love expressed through sacrifice rather than presence. I want her to know she's enough, I said. Just as she is, not because of what she achieves or accumulates. Just because she exists. Then tell her that, every day, until she believes it in her bones. When I returned to work in April, the program had grown in my absence. Jennifer had launched the Bronx Clinic. Terrence had developed a partnership with 3 homeless shelters to provide financial advocacy on site. Our 4th cohort of advocates was in training. You're not indispensable, Jennifer said, grinning. Hope that doesn't hurt your ego. It's the best thing I could hear. Means we actually built something sustainable. That was always the goal, right? Build something bigger than yourself? Yeah, doesn't make it less weird to realize it worked. That spring, something happened that I should have seen coming but didn't. We got a call from a reporter at ProPublica. They were investigating Silverman and Cross, allegations of fraud, market manipulation, illegal trading practices. We understand they fund your organization, the reporter said. We'd like to ask you some questions about that relationship. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? Whether you were aware of their practices, whether the funding influenced your advocacy positions, whether you have documentation of your interactions with them. I thought about Richard, about the $500,000, about the independence provisions we'd fought for. I'll cooperate fully, I said. But I need to be clear, we maintained complete independence. We've publicly opposed their policy positions multiple times. We know. That's actually what made us think you'd be willing to talk. The investigation went public in June. Front page of the Wall Street Journal. Hedge fund giant faces federal charges for market manipulation. Silverman and Cross had allegedly been running a scheme for years, artificially inflating stock prices, insider trading, defrauding investors. The SEC was bringing charges. The DOJ was considering criminal prosecution. Richard was named specifically, not as the mastermind, that was the founder, but as someone who knew and didn't stop it. My phone exploded with calls from reporters wanting to know about our funding relationship. Did you know? They asked. No, I left that world because it destroyed me. I didn't maintain contacts. I didn't ask questions I should have asked. Will you return the money? That was the question I'd been asking myself. We'd spent most of it, used it to help hundreds of families, to train dozens of advocates, to expand the program to people who desperately needed it. Returning it meant cutting programs, laying off staff, telling families we could no longer help them. But keeping it meant being associated with fraud, with the exact kind of exploitation we'd built the program to fight against. I called an emergency meeting with the team, laid out everything, the allegations, the media attention, the ethical dilemma. We should return whatever's left, Terrence said immediately. That's $80,000, Jennifer countered. That's a year of legal support for our clients. How many families does that help? How many families are hurt by association with a firm under investigation for fraud? Terrence shot back. The families we've already helped. Do we undo that help because the money was dirty? Tommy asked. Where do we draw the line? The debate went on for hours. Finally, I spoke up. Here's what I think we do, I said. We return the remaining funds, publicly, with a statement explaining why. We're transparent about what we spent and what it accomplished. We acknowledge that we should have done more due diligence before accepting the funding, and we commit to stricter vetting procedures going forward. That leaves us short $80,000 for the year, Jennifer said. Then we fundraise. We're good at this work. People value it. We'll find other funding. Clean funding. What if we can't? Then we scale back. But we do it with integrity. That's worth more than $80,000. The vote was unanimous this time. We returned the money on a Friday. Held a press conference at the kitchen. I read a statement Rachel had helped me write. The Financial Justice Fellowship was built on the principle that financial systems should serve people, not exploit them. We recently learned that one of our funders, Silverman and Cross, is under investigation for serious financial crimes, the exact kind of exploitation we were founded to fight against. We're returning the remaining funds from their grant, approximately $80,000. We're also being transparent about what we spent. It helped us train 42 financial advocates who have assisted over 300 families in the past year. We don't regret the help we provided. We regret our failure to adequately vet the source of funding. We're implementing new procedures to ensure this doesn't happen again. This setback doesn't change our mission. If anything, it reinforces it. The systems that allowed Silverman and Cross to allegedly defraud investors are the same systems that allow payday lenders to trap families in debt cycles. The same systems that let medical debt destroy lives. The same systems that make housing unaffordable while corporate profits soar. We're going to keep fighting those systems. With cleaner money, with stronger ethics, with the same commitment to families that's always driven us. Thank you. The response was unexpected. Within a week, we received donations totaling $95,000. Small donors mostly, $20 here, $50 there. A few larger gifts from people who appreciated our transparency. One donation stood out, $15,000 from someone named Patricia Miller. I didn't recognize the name until I called to thank her. This is David Chen from the Financial Justice Fellowship. I wanted to personally thank you for your generous donation. David! Patricia's voice, Tommy's ex-wife. I saw the press conference. What you did, returning that money, that took courage. Tommy always said you had more integrity than you realized. Wanted to support that. Patricia, this is incredibly generous, but Tommy's been telling me about the program for months, about the families you help. My husband and I talked about it, and we want to contribute. We're comfortable. We can spare it, and it matters to Tommy, which means it matters to me. After we hung up, I sat in my office crying. The woman Tommy thought he'd failed. The woman who'd left when he had nothing. She was helping fund the program he'd helped build. Redemption looked like this, apparently. Small, circular, unexpected. Richard called a few days after the press conference. I saw what you did, he said. Returning the money. We couldn't keep it. You understand that. I do. And I respect it. He paused. I'm cooperating with the investigation, telling them everything I know. I'll probably lose my job, maybe face charges. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew. Not everything, but enough. I convinced myself I was doing good by funding your program, that it balanced out the bad. But you can't launder ethics, can you? I should have left years ago. It's not too late to do something different. It might be, but I'm going to try. Another pause. Thank you, David, for showing me what integrity actually looks like, even when it costs you. By August, we'd not only recovered the lost funding, we'd exceeded it. The publicity from returning the money had brought us more attention than any marketing campaign could have. Donations increased. Volunteer applications tripled. Other organizations reached out about partnerships. Ironic, Keisha observed. Doing the right thing turned out to be good business. That's not why we did it, I said. I know. That's exactly why it worked. Elena was 6 months old, starting to sit up on her own, laughing at everything, reaching for faces with sticky hands. Tommy came over for dinner most Sundays now. Had become the grandfather she'd never have otherwise. My dad was gone. Rachel's parents had died in a car accident years before we met. She looks like you, Tommy told Rachel one Sunday. Elena was in his lap, grabbing at his nose. She has David's eyes, Rachel said. She has both of you. But more importantly, she has a future you're building for her. One where she knows she's loved for who she is, not what she achieves. You helped build that future, I said. That night you knocked on our door. You changed everything. I was just returning a favor. Rachel had been feeding me for years. It was time to feed you. Different kind of hunger, same need. We put Elena to bed after Tommy left. Stood over her crib watching her sleep. You ever miss it? Rachel asked. The money. The lifestyle. Sometimes I miss the ease of it. Not worrying about whether we can afford things. But I don't miss the emptiness. The constant feeling that I wasn't enough unless I was making more, achieving more, accumulating more. What do you feel now? I thought about it. Really thought. Sufficient, I said. I feel sufficient. Like what I have is enough. Like what I'm doing matters. Like I'm finally the person I was supposed to become. Rachel leaned against me. Me too. That fall, I got an invitation that surprised me. A finance professor at Columbia wanted me to guest lecture in his behavioral economics class. Topic: the true cost of success. I'm not an academic, I told him when he called. You're something better. You're a cautionary tale with a redemption arc. You've lived both sides, the wealth and the loss. My students need to hear that story before they make the same mistakes you did. I agreed. The lecture hall held 200 students. Most looked younger than I'd been when I started at Silverman and Cross. Hungry, ambitious, ready to conquer the world through spreadsheets and algorithms. I recognized that hunger. Had lived it. I'm going to tell you about the worst trade I ever made, I began. It wasn't a stock pick. It wasn't a bad algorithm. It was trading my life for money. Trading presence for wealth. Trading meaning for accumulation. And the thing is, I won that trade. Made millions. By Wall Street standards, I was a massive success. By human standards, I was bankrupt long before the actual bankruptcy. I told them everything. The 80-hour weeks. The panic attack. The gun. Tommy at the door. The best financial decision I ever made, I said, was losing all my money. Because it forced me to figure out what I was actually worth. And it wasn't my net worth. It was my contribution. My relationships. My purpose. You're about to enter careers where you'll be rewarded for extracting value, for finding inefficiencies and exploiting them, for winning at someone else's expense. And you'll be told that's just how the game works. But I'm here to tell you, there are other games. Better games. Games where winning means everyone wins. Where the scoreboard is measured in lives improved, not dollars accumulated. The room was silent. I'm not telling you not to pursue finance careers, I continued. I'm telling you to know the cost, to measure what you're trading for that salary, and to remember that you can always change the game you're playing, but you can't get back the years you spend playing the wrong one. After the lecture, a student approached me. Young woman, maybe 22. Mr. Chen, I've been offered a job at Goldman. Incredible salary. But I've also been accepted to teach for America. My parents think I'm crazy for considering teaching over banking. What do you think? I think I want to matter. But I also want financial security. And I don't know how to choose. I thought about Tommy's advice from years ago. Here's what I've learned, I said. Financial security is important, but it's not the same as financial excess. You can have enough without having everything. The question isn't, what will make me richest? It's what will let me sleep at night. What will make me proud of who I'm becoming? How do I know the answer? You imagine yourself at 50. You look back at the choice you made at 22. Which version of you do you want to have been? The one who took the safe bet or the one who took the meaningful one? She nodded slowly. I think I know my answer. Then you already know what to do. The hard part is having the courage to do it. 2 years after Elena was born, Rachel got pregnant again. Twins this time, boys. We named them Marcus and Thomas, after the two men who'd taught me what strength actually looked like. Tommy cried when we told him. You're naming one of your sons after me? After the man who saved my life and showed me how to live it? Yeah, I'm just a guy who makes pancakes and helps people read contracts. You're the guy who knocked on the door when I was about to pull the trigger. You're the guy who taught me that falling isn't the same as failing. You're exactly who I want my son to learn from. The twins arrived in December during the coldest week of the year. Marcus came first. 8 pounds, loud, demanding attention. Thomas followed 12 minutes later, 7 pounds, quieter, observant. 3 kids, I said to Rachel in the hospital room. We were outnumbered now, surrounded by tiny humans who needed us completely. 3 kids, she repeated, looking overwhelmed and elated. What were we thinking? That we wanted a full house. That we wanted the chaos we never had growing up. That we wanted to build the family we needed. Mission accomplished, she said, watching Elena peering at her new brothers with suspicious fascination. The program continued growing. We'd trained over 200 advocates across 5 cohorts. Opened clinics in all 5 boroughs, plus Newark and Yonkers. Helped over 5,000 families navigate financial crises. But the work that mattered most was the smallest. Tommy started a program called Second Chance Carpentry, teaching formerly homeless people woodworking skills, giving them tools and purpose, and a path forward. Jennifer launched an immigrant financial rights network, training community members to help their neighbors in 15 different languages. Terrence created a tenant organizing initiative, helping people collectively fight back against predatory landlords. Each program grew from someone's lived experience. Each one addressed real needs with real solutions. We're not saving people, Tommy told a new cohort of advocates. We're giving them tools to save themselves. There's a difference. The first creates dependency. The second creates dignity. On a Tuesday morning in March, 5 years after Tommy first knocked on my door, we gathered at the kitchen for a different kind of celebration. Tommy's daughter, Lily, was getting married, and she'd asked to have the ceremony at the kitchen, surrounded by the community that had given her father back to her. It wasn't a traditional venue, but nothing about this journey had been traditional. The ceremony was simple. Lily wore a dress she'd made herself. Her husband-to-be, James, was an architect she'd met at school. They'd bonded over their shared love of building things. Tommy walked her down the aisle, a path between the same tables where we served breakfast every Tuesday. He was crying. Before they'd taken 3 steps. "You okay, Dad?" Lily whispered. "More than okay. More than I ever thought I'd be again." Patricia was there, sitting next to Greg. Marcus and Jennifer were there. Terrence and Keisha. Half the regular Tuesday morning crew. Rachel was there with our 3 kids. Elena, now 5, and helping to scatter flower petals. The twins being suspiciously quiet in their stroller. Family. All of it. Blood and chosen and everything in between. During the reception, Tommy gave a speech. "Most people here know my story," he began. "How I lost everything. How I spent 8 years on the streets. How I nearly gave up more times than I can count. What you might not know is how close I came to not being here. To not seeing this day. To missing the chance to walk my daughter down the aisle because I couldn't see past my own shame. There was a night, 5 years ago, when I knocked on a door I had no business knocking on. The man inside was in his own darkness. And somehow we found each other. We pulled each other out. David taught me that helping people was the path back to myself. And I taught him that losing everything can be the beginning of finding what actually matters. Lily, you taught me the most important lesson of all. That love doesn't require perfection. That showing up, even years late, even broken, even empty-handed, is enough. That family doesn't abandon you when you fall. It just waits for you to be ready to stand up again. James, you're getting an incredible woman. She knows how to build things. Real things. Lasting things. She learned that from watching things fall apart and deciding that meant she needed to learn how to put them back together. To everyone here, thank you for being family. For proving that the people who matter most aren't the ones who knew you when you were successful. They're the ones who knew you when you were broken and loved you anyway. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later that night, after the celebration ended, after the twins had been put to bed, after Elena had finally crashed from the excitement, Rachel and I sat on our small couch in our small apartment. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Rachel said. "What?" "The Tribeca loft. The apartment we lost. I drove past it last month. There's a different name on the buzzer. Someone else living our old life. Do you miss it? She thought about it. I miss the space sometimes, the view, having a dishwasher, she smiled. But I don't miss who we were when we lived there. We were strangers sharing an address. Now we're family sharing a life. I'll take this cramped apartment full of love over that empty loft any day. Even with 3 kids and no dishwasher? Especially with 3 kids and no dishwasher. This is the life we actually wanted. We just had to lose everything to find it. I thought about the gun I'd thrown in the Hudson 5 years ago. The man who'd held that gun, desperate, lost, measuring his worth by his bank balance. He was gone, dead in every way that mattered. The man I'd become, father, advocate, friend, builder of things that couldn't be measured in dollars. He was someone I'd never imagined becoming. Better, not richer. Not more successful by conventional metrics, just better, more present, more purposeful, more myself. The next morning was a Tuesday. I left the apartment at 6:30 a.m., kissed Rachel and the kids goodbye, and headed to the kitchen. Tommy was already there, setting up for breakfast service. "Morning," he said. "Ready for another day of changing the world in small increments?" "Always." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, cracking eggs, brewing coffee, setting out plates. At 7 a.m. the doors opened. Marcus came through first. Kitchen Marcus, not my son. He was doing better now. Had gotten a job as a sous chef at a restaurant in Park Slope. But he still came to the kitchen every Tuesday, helping out, staying connected. Jennifer arrived with her daughters, both in high school now, both thriving. Terrence brought a new family he was helping. Parents and 3 kids, recently arrived from Honduras, navigating the overwhelming bureaucracy of starting over in America. And then the door opened again. A man I didn't recognize. Late 30s, expensive coat, exhausted eyes. The look of someone who'd been running for too long and finally hit a wall. He stood in the doorway, uncertain. Tommy walked over. Extended his hand. "First time here?" he asked gently. The man nodded. I don't know why I came. I saw the sign. I'm not homeless. I shouldn't be taking resources from people who actually need them. Everyone who walks through that door needs something, Tommy said. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's help. Sometimes it's just a reminder that they're not alone. Whatever you need, we've probably got it. Come on in. The man's eyes filled with tears. I lost my job. My wife left. I've been having dark thoughts. Tommy put a hand on his shoulder. I know those thoughts. They're liars. Come sit down. Have some coffee. Let's talk. He led the man to a table, poured him coffee, sat across from him, and I watched Tommy do for a stranger what he'd done for me 5 years ago. See him. Really see him. And offer a different story than the one ending in darkness. I served breakfast to the families who came through. Listened to their stories, offered help where I could, connected people with resources, did the small work that added up to something meaningful. Around 9 a.m., the man Tommy had been sitting with stood up, shook Tommy's hand. His face looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd put down something heavy. Thank you, I heard him say. You might have saved my life today. Nah, Tommy said. You saved your own life by walking through that door. I just reminded you why it was worth saving. After the breakfast service ended, I was cleaning up when Tommy called me over. Remember that guy from this morning? The one who came in looking lost? Yeah, is he okay? He will be. Gave him your contact info. Told him about the Financial Justice Fellowship. Sounds like he's got some debt issues. But more than that, he's got the same crisis you had 5 years ago. Thinking his worth is tied to his job title. Think he'll reach out? If he's ready. If not, maybe he'll come back next Tuesday. Doesn't matter. Seeds planted. I thought about that. About seeds planted. About Tommy planting a seed in me 5 years ago. About how long it took to grow into something real. You ever think about how many people we don't save? I asked. How many walk past the kitchen and don't come in? How many we never reach? Every day, Tommy said. And every day I remind myself that we're not responsible for reaching everyone. Just the ones who show up. That's enough, is it? Has to be. Because the alternative is drowning in guilt over people we can't help while ignoring the ones we can. And that doesn't serve anyone. That evening, Rachel and I put the kids to bed together. Elena insisted on the story of how Mommy and Daddy met. Her favorite. The twins were already asleep. Tiny fists curled against their cheeks. Daddy used to work in a big building with lots of computers, Rachel told Elena. And he was very busy and very tired and sometimes very sad. Why was Daddy sad? Elena asked. Same question every time. Because he forgot what made him happy. He forgot that the most important things aren't things at all. They're people. They're love. They're helping others. But then he remembered. Elena prompted. Then a very kind man knocked on our door and reminded him. And Daddy started helping people. And that made him happy again. Uncle Tommy. That's right, baby. Uncle Tommy. Elena's eyes were drooping. Almost asleep, Daddy, she murmured. When I grow up, can I help people too? You can do anything you want, I said. But yes, helping people is a very good choice. Good. Because Uncle Tommy says helping people is the best job in the whole world. Uncle Tommy is very smart. I know, she said, and then she was asleep. Rachel and I went to the kitchen, our kitchen, the tiny one in our apartment, not the community kitchen, made tea. Sat at our small table. She wants to help people when she grows up, I told Rachel. She's 5. Last week she wanted to be a dinosaur. Still, something sticking. About helping, about purpose, about measuring success differently than I was taught to measure it. That's because she's watching you live it. Kids don't learn from what you tell them. They learn from what you do. I thought about my own father, working himself to death to provide. Barely present, always stressed about money. I was breaking that cycle, building something different. You know what's strange? I said. 5 years ago, I had millions in the bank and I was the poorest man alive. Now I have 3 kids and a tiny apartment and medical debt from the twins and student loans will probably die still paying off. And I'm the richest man I know. Not strange, Rachel said. Just the truth you finally learned. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Mr. Chen. We met at the kitchen this morning. Tommy gave me your info. I'm the guy who is having a hard time. I'd like to talk to you about the financial advocacy program. Also about the dark thoughts. I'm not ready to give up yet. Michael, I showed Rachel the text. You going to help him? She asked. If he shows up, yeah. And if he doesn't, then I hope someone else finds him. Or he finds himself. Or he just keeps surviving until he's ready to do more than survive. That's all we can do, isn't it? Show up. Offer help. Hope it lands. Yeah, but sometimes it lands. Sometimes it changes everything. Later that night, after Rachel had gone to bed, I sat in our living room, looked around at our life. The toys scattered across the floor. The photos on the walls. Elena's first birthday. The twins coming home from the hospital. Tommy and Lily at her wedding. The furniture we'd bought secondhand. The plants Rachel kept alive through sheer willpower, evidence of a life fully lived, not a life perfectly curated. I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, scrolled back 5 years, found a picture I'd forgotten existed. The Tribeca loft. Empty. The day we moved out. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Exposed brick. River views. It looked like a magazine spread. Beautiful, expensive, empty. I deleted the photo. Didn't need it anymore. Wasn't going back to that version of success. The next morning, I got an email from the man from Columbia, the professor who'd invited me to lecture. David, thought you'd want to know? The student who asked you about choosing between Goldman and Teach for America? She took the teaching job. Said your talk helped her realize she wanted to matter more than she wanted to be rich. Several other students have reached out asking for your contact info. Want to learn more about the Financial Justice Fellowship. Some are considering nonprofit work. Others just want to understand how to build a meaningful career. You're changing lives beyond the families you directly help. Wanted you to know that. Best Professor Morris, and I forwarded the email to Tommy. His response came 2 minutes later. See? Seeds. Everywhere you look, seeds. That afternoon, Michael, the man from the kitchen, came to my office. He was different than the desperate figure from Tuesday morning. More composed. Still tired, but no longer defeated. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "Of course." "Tell me what's going on." He laid it out. Recently divorced. Lost his job in a corporate restructuring. Credit card debt from trying to maintain a lifestyle he could no longer afford. Starting to spiral. "The money problems are bad," he said. "But the real problem is I don't know who I am without my job title. I've been a vice president of marketing for 8 years. Now I'm just Michael. And I don't know what that means." I knew that feeling. Intimately. "Can I tell you something?" I said. "Please." 5 years ago I was where you are. Different details, same crisis. And someone told me that I'd been measuring myself by the wrong scoreboard. That who I was mattered more than what I had or what title was on my business card. Did you believe them? Not at first. But I didn't have a choice. I'd lost everything. So I had to figure out who I was when everything was stripped away. And you know what I found? What? That the real me, the person I was supposed to be, had been buried under years of chasing the wrong things. And losing everything gave me a chance to dig him out. Michael was quiet for a moment. "So what do I do?" he asked. "Practically, today. Today, we look at your debt. Figure out what's real and what's predatory. Make a plan. Then we look at what you actually want to do with your life, not what you think you're supposed to do. And we build from there. It's that simple." "Simple? Yes, easy?" "No, but possible. Very possible." We worked together for 3 hours that afternoon. By the end, Michael had a plan. Bankruptcy for the credit card debt. A budget that worked on unemployment income. A list of careers he'd always been curious about but never pursued because they didn't pay enough or impress enough. "I always wanted to teach," he admitted. "Marketing to college students. Helping them understand how business actually works. But it pays a third of what I was making." "Can you live on a third of what you were making?" "Honestly, probably happier than I was living on what I was making. The money didn't make me happy. It just made me busy and stressed and empty." "Then maybe you just found your answer." He looked at me. "You really think I should leave corporate marketing to teach?" "I think you should do what makes you feel alive. What lets you look at yourself in the mirror and feel proud. Money is renewable. Time isn't. Years spent doing work that crushes your soul, you never get those back." Michael stood up. Extended his hand. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for the financial help. For the permission." "Permission? To want something different. To choose meaning over money. To believe that's not crazy. It's not crazy. It's the sanest thing you could do." After Michael left, I sat in my office thinking about the conversation. 5 years ago, I'd been Michael. Lost. Broken. Measuring my worth by the wrong metrics. Tommy had given me permission to choose differently, and now I was doing the same for someone else. The cycle continued. The healing spread. That night at dinner, Elena asked a question that stopped me mid-bite. "Daddy, are we rich?" Rachel and I exchanged glances. "Why do you ask, sweetie?" Rachel said. "Because Mia at school said her daddy is rich because he has a big car." "We don't have a big car. Does that mean we're not rich?" I put down my fork. Looked at my daughter. "We're very rich," I said. "Just not with money." "What does that mean?" "It means we have everything we need. We have each other. We have Uncle Tommy and Marcus and Jennifer. We have work that matters. We have a home full of love." That's real wealth, Elena. The kind that can't be taken away. But Mia's daddy has a BMW, and that's nice for Mia's daddy. But having a BMW doesn't make you rich if you're not happy. And not having a BMW doesn't make you poor if you have everything that actually matters. Elena thought about this. "So we're happy rich?" "Exactly. Happy rich. The best kind." "Okay," she said, and went back to her chicken nuggets. Crisis averted. Lesson planted. Seed growing. The weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. Michael ended up getting a teaching position at a community college. Sent me an email after his first week. "You were right. This is what I was supposed to be doing." I forgot what it feels like to be excited about Monday morning. The man from my Columbia lecture, the one who'd been considering finance versus teaching, reached out. She'd taken the Teach for America position. Was teaching math in the Bronx. Struggling but purposeful. "I won't lie, it's hard," she wrote. "I'm making $45,000 a year and my friends from school are making $150,000. But I go to bed tired from good work instead of tired from meaningless work. That's worth more than the salary differential. Seeds. Everywhere seeds." On a Tuesday morning in November, exactly 5 years after Tommy had knocked on my door, we gathered at the kitchen for a special breakfast. The occasion: Tommy was receiving an award from the mayor's office, community service recognition, for his work with Second Chance Carpentry and his advocacy for the homeless. Tommy stood at the front of the room in a suit Lily had bought him for the occasion, looking uncomfortable with the attention but trying to accept it gracefully. "I don't deserve this," he said when the mayor handed him the plaque. "Yes, you do," the mayor said. "You've helped dozens of people transition from homelessness to housing. You've taught valuable skills. You've advocated for policy changes. You've made this city better." "I just showed up," Tommy said. "That's all I did. Showed up and tried to help. Anyone can do that. But not everyone does," the mayor said. "That's what makes it special." After the ceremony, after the photos and the handshakes and the congratulations, Tommy found me in the kitchen storage room. "5 years ago today," he said. "I remember. You had a gun. I remember that too. And I knocked on your door." Best knock I ever hear. Tommy sat down on a crate of canned tomatoes, the same spot where he'd sat when he opened Lily's letter all those years ago. "You know what I was thinking about that night?" he asked. "Before I knocked on your door?" "What?" "Whether I should. Whether it was my place. You were this Wall Street guy with millions, and I was a homeless man who ate at soup kitchens. What did I have to offer you?" "Everything," I said. "You had everything to offer." Rachel convinced me. She came to the kitchen that afternoon. Said you weren't doing well. Said she was worried. Asked if I'd check on you. He looked at me. I almost said no. Almost said I wasn't qualified to help someone like you. But then I thought about all the times I'd needed help and been too proud to ask for it. And I thought maybe you were doing the same thing. I was. So I went, knocked on your door, and you answered. You could have told me to leave. Could have been embarrassed or angry that your wife sent a homeless man to check on you. But you let me in. You saved my life, Tommy. No, you saved your own life by opening the door. I just reminded you there were other doors to open after that one. We sat in silence for a moment. The sounds of the kitchen filtered through the door. Voices, laughter, the clatter of plates and silverware. 5 years, Tommy said. You've built something incredible. The fellowship, the advocates, the families you've helped. You should be proud. We built it, all of us. None of this happens without you, without Rachel, without Marcus and Jennifer and everyone who showed up. That's the thing about building things, Tommy said. You can't do it alone. I learned that the hard way. Tried to carry everything myself when I lost my business. Pushed everyone away. Ended up on the streets. It wasn't until I learned to let people help me that I found my way back. You taught me that. And you're teaching it to others. That's how it spreads. One person learning it and passing it on. Like a chain of people pulling each other out of dark places. The storage room door opened. Rachel poked her head in. There you two are. We're about to cut the cake. Tommy, you're the guest of honor. You have to be there. Cake? Tommy looked embarrassed. You didn't have to. It's not a celebration without cake, Rachel said firmly. Now come on, and bring David. Your kids are getting antsy, and Marcus, our Marcus, not kitchen Marcus, just threw a handful of mashed banana at the mayor's assistant. Tommy laughed. That's my godson, teaching people that fancy titles don't make you special. We followed Rachel back into the main room. The cake was simple. Sheet cake from the grocery store decorated with congratulations Tommy and blue frosting. Elena had helped Rachel add sprinkles, many, many sprinkles. Everyone saying, Tommy cried. Again. I need to stop doing that, he said, wiping his eyes. Never, Lily said, hugging him. I like that you cry now. The dad I remember before was afraid to show emotion. This dad, the one who cries at cake, he's better. That evening, after the celebration ended, after we'd cleaned up and put away the folding tables and swept the floors, I found myself alone in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd first scrambled eggs 5 years ago, where I'd learned to listen instead of just hearing, where I'd begun to understand that true wealth had nothing to do with bank balances. I walked to the window, looked out at the street. The Lower East Side at twilight, alive with people heading home from work, heading out for the evening, living their lives. How many of them were where I'd been 5 years ago? Successful on paper but empty inside, measuring themselves by metrics that didn't matter? How many were about to lose everything and didn't know it yet? How many would survive the loss and find something better on the other side? I couldn't save them all. Tommy was right about that. Could only help the ones who showed up. The ones who knocked on the door or walked through it or let someone knock on theirs. But I could keep showing up, keep offering an alternative story, keep proving that losing everything wasn't the end. It could be the beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, you don't know me. My name is Sarah. My husband is in crisis. Lost his job talking about ending things. Someone told me about your program, about how you help people who think they've lost everything. I don't know what to do. Can you help? I stared at the text for a long moment. Another door opening, another person reaching out, another chance to pass forward what Tommy had given me. I typed back, yes, I can help. Or I can connect you with someone who can. When can we talk? The response came immediately. Anytime. Please. I'm so scared. I called her right then, stood in that kitchen, looking out at the darkening street, and talked to a stranger about hope and help and the path back from despair. I gave her resources, phone numbers, names of people who could help, and I told her what Tommy had told me 5 years ago, that showing up was enough, that asking for help was strength, not weakness, that her husband's worth wasn't measured by his job title or his bank account. Can I tell him you'll talk to him? She asked, her voice thick with tears. Absolutely. Have him call me. Anytime, day or night. I'll answer. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Because someone did it for me when I needed it most. And because it's the only way I know how to live now, helping people find their way back from the edge. After we hung up, I stayed in the kitchen a while longer. Thought about the gun I'd thrown in the Hudson. The man who'd held it. The desperation and shame and absolute certainty that there was no path forward. That man had been so wrong about so many things. He'd been wrong about what made him valuable. Wrong about what constituted failure. Wrong about whether life was worth living when everything fell apart. But he'd been right about one thing, that life as he knew it was ending. He just hadn't realized that was the best thing that could have happened. That evening, after the celebration ended, after we'd cleaned up and put away the folding tables and swept the floors, I found myself alone in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd first scrambled eggs 5 years ago, where I'd learned to listen instead of just hearing, where I'd begun to understand that true wealth had nothing to do with bank balances. I walked to the window, looked out at the street, the Lower East Side at twilight, alive with people heading home from work, heading out for the evening, living their lives. How many of them were where I'd been 5 years ago? Successful on paper but empty inside, measuring themselves by metrics that didn't matter? How many were about to lose everything and didn't know it yet? How many would survive the loss and find something better on the other side? I couldn't save them all. Tommy was right about that. Could only help the ones who showed up, the ones who knocked on the door or walked through it or let someone knock on theirs. But I could keep showing up. Keep offering an alternative story. Keep proving that losing everything wasn't the end. It could be the beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, you don't know me. My name is Sarah. My husband is in crisis. Lost his job talking about ending things. Someone told me about your program. About how you help people who think they've lost everything. I don't know what to do. Can you help? I stared at the text for a long moment. Another door opening. Another person reaching out. Another chance to pass forward what Tommy had given me. I typed back, "Yes, I can help. Or I can connect you with someone who can." "When can we talk?" The response came immediately. "Anytime. Please. I'm so scared." I called her right then. Stood in that kitchen, looking out at the darkening street, and talked to a stranger about hope and help and the path back from despair. I gave her resources, phone numbers, names of people who could help, and I told her what Tommy had told me 5 years ago, that showing up was enough. That asking for help was strength, not weakness. That her husband's worth wasn't measured by his job title or his bank account. "Can I tell him you'll talk to him?" she asked, her voice thick with tears. "Absolutely. Have him call me, anytime, day or night. I'll answer. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." "Because someone did it for me when I needed it most. And because it's the only way I know how to live now, helping people find their way back from the edge." After we hung up, I stayed in the kitchen a while longer. Thought about the gun I'd thrown in the Hudson, the man who'd held it, the desperation and shame and absolute certainty that there was no path forward. That man had been so wrong about so many things. He'd been wrong about what made him valuable, wrong about what constituted failure, wrong about whether life was worth living when everything fell apart. But he'd been right about one thing, that life as he knew it was ending. He just hadn't realized that was the best thing that could have happened. Rachel called. "You coming home?" "Kids want to say goodnight." "On my way." I took one last look around the kitchen, this sacred space where so many people had found help, hope, second chances. Then I locked up and headed home. Home to my small apartment. My 3 beautiful children. My wife, who'd never given up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Home to a life I'd never imagined wanting back when I was chasing millions. Home to wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars, but could be felt in every moment. As I walked through the Brooklyn streets, I thought about the question Elena had asked. "Are we rich?" "Yes, baby. Yes, we are. We're rich in purpose, rich in community, rich in love. Rich in the knowledge that we're building something that matters, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who walks through our doors looking for help. Rich in the understanding that falling down isn't failure. Staying down is. Rich in the certainty that the best things in life aren't things at all." I got home to find Tommy already there. He'd beaten me back, was sitting on the floor with Elena and the twins, building something with blocks. "Uncle Tommy is showing us how to build a castle," Elena announced. "With a drawbridge," Tommy added. "Every good castle needs a drawbridge." "Why?" one of the twins asked. "Marcus. Always asking why. Because sometimes you need to let people in, and sometimes you need to protect what you've built. The trick is knowing when to do which." I sat down on the floor with them. Joined the construction project. Rachel came out of the bedroom, fresh from putting on pajamas. "Look at this," she said, smiling. "My whole family. Building castles on a Tuesday night. It's a good life," I said. "It's the best life," she corrected. Later, after Tommy had gone home, after the kids were finally asleep, after Rachel and I had collapsed on the couch in exhausted contentment, she asked me a question. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Wall Street? All of it?" "Never," I said without hesitation. That world almost killed me. This one saved me. Even though we have a fraction of what we used to have, we have everything we used to have. We just couldn't see it because it was buried under things that didn't matter. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, of who you've become. I'm proud of us, of what we built after everything fell apart." "What did we build?" I thought about it, about the program, the advocates, the families helped, about Tommy finding his daughter, about Elena wanting to help people when she grew up, about the text I'd gotten tonight from Sarah, desperate to save her husband. "We built proof," I said. "Proof that losing everything isn't the end. That rock bottom can be a foundation. That the best version of yourself is often hiding underneath the successful version. That wealth is measured in moments, not money. That showing up is enough. That we're all just one knock on the door away from everything changing. That's a lot of proof, Rachel said sleepily. Yeah, but someone needed to prove it. Might as well be us. That night I dreamed about the gun, not the moment I held it. The moment after I threw it away, standing on that bridge in the rain, watching it disappear into the dark water, feeling the weight of it leave my hands. In the dream, Tommy was standing next to me. You ready? He asked. For what? To build something better than what you tore down. I don't know how. Sure you do. You just forgot. Come on, I'll remind you. And he led me away from the bridge. Back toward the light. Back toward life. Back toward the future I didn't know I had. I woke up to the sound of the twins crying. 3 a.m. feeding time. Rachel was already up, heading to their room. I got it, I said. Go back to sleep. I stumbled to the kitchen. Made bottles. Went to the twins' room. Fed Marcus first. He ate hungrily, eyes already closing. Put him back down. Then Thomas. He ate slower, more thoughtfully. Watching my face the whole time. You're going to be the observer, aren't you? I whispered to him. The one who thinks before acting. Like your namesake. Thomas blinked slowly. Kept eating. Your Uncle Tommy, the real one, not your brother. He saved my life once. Did I ever tell you that? Well, I guess I haven't told you anything. You're 6 months old. Thomas's eyes started to droop. But I'll tell you someday. About how your dad almost didn't make it to meet you. About how a homeless man knocked on a door and changed everything. About how losing millions led to finding meaning. About how the worst thing that ever happened turned out to be the best thing. Thomas was asleep now. But I kept talking, and you know what I hope? I hope you never have to learn these lessons the way I did. I hope you grow up knowing that your worth isn't your wealth. That success is measured in lives touched, not dollars earned. That the best thing you can do is show up for people when they need it most. I put him back in his crib, stood there watching my sons sleep, these tiny humans who would grow up in a different world than I did. Not richer, but better, with parents who knew that being present mattered more than being perfect. That love was more valuable than luxury, that a life of purpose beat a life of profit every single time. The next morning was Wednesday. Not a clinic day, not a training day, just a regular Wednesday. I went to work at the fellowship office, answered emails, reviewed grant applications, met with Jennifer about the immigrant rights program, regular work, important work, work that mattered. Around noon my phone rang. Unknown number. This is David. Mr. Chen? This is Mark, Sarah's husband. My wife said you talked to me, the man in crisis, the one on the edge. I'm glad you called, I said. What's going on? And I listened, really listened. The way Tommy had taught me, heard the fear in his voice. The shame. The absolute conviction that he'd failed beyond redemption. I knew that voice. I'd spoken in that voice once. Mark, I said when he finished. I'm going to tell you something that's going to be hard to believe right now. But I need you to try to hear it. Okay. You haven't failed. You've just discovered what doesn't work. And that's the beginning of figuring out what does. I know it doesn't feel that way. I know it feels like the end. But it's not. It's just a really painful middle. How do you know? Because I've been exactly where you are. Different details, same despair. And I'm still here. More than that, I'm thriving in ways I never did when I had everything. I don't see how that's possible. You don't have to see it yet. You just have to believe that it's possible. Can you do that? Can you stay alive long enough to see if I'm right? Silence on the other end, long enough that I started to worry. Then, yeah, I can do to... And there it was, the cycle continuing, the healing spreading, one knock on the door, one conversation, one person showing up for another, building something bigger than ourselves, building proof that falling isn't failing, building hope from wreckage. Tommy came over, refilled our coffee. You got this? He asked me quietly. Yeah, I got this. He squeezed my shoulder, moved on to the next table, and I sat with this stranger, offering him the same gift Tommy had offered me a decade ago. Different story, a different ending, different way to measure worth. The truth that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what actually matters. Sometimes the best thing You can lose is the life you thought you were supposed to live. Sometimes rock bottom is just a foundation. Sometimes a knock on the door changes everything. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to pass forward what someone gave you when you needed it most. The knowledge that you matter. Not because of what you have, but because of who you are and who you choose to become when everything else falls away.